So Mule,
Uh-huh.
do you like video games?
A little bit.
I also like video games.
What video games do you like?
That's a great question. All sorts, but the video game that I'm playing right now, and I've been playing a lot of Horizon Zero Dawn.
Uh-huh.
Do you like Horizon Zero Dawn, the video game?
It's too political for me. Welcome to Red Planet, where we talk about video games. We don't do that. It's Mule and Kira Day.
Yay! That's why you did such a great intro.
It was a great intro. So glad, so happy about that. Very, very good. We're gonna start the show. We're moving on swiftly from the cold open. Kira, we'll start with Kira because there's only two of us. So who else am I gonna say? Me. Kira, what's the most base thing you did this week?
The most base thing I did this week. Well, other than, existing as a bisexual during Pride Month. Happy Pride Month, everyone, by the way. I'm a newly realized bisexual, so this is my first Pride. So I'm not really quite sure what to do differently this year.
You feeling proud?
Just be proud, I suppose. Yeah.
I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. I also popped into a bar the other day, and because I was grabbing a drink, and I somehow managed to shoehorn into the conversation trans rights. So I'm pretty proud of that with a bunch of normies.
Cool. Yeah, that is good.
I don't even know how I count on the topic, but I remember one person kind of looking like weirded out, but I was like, this is gonna keep going with it. I don't care.
And so it was like a good response then?
Yeah, it was a good response. Yeah.
Good.
Well, Mule, since we were all both in the same room at the same time virtually, I just wanted to ask you a question. Okay. What's the most base thing you've done this week?
Well, thank you for asking, Kira. I was actually off last week. I don't know if anyone noticed. Probably not, but yeah, so I have had like a whole week of doing nothing this week because I've been ill. So I have nothing to say. I've done zero based things this week. But the Saturday before the last show, I was helping organize the all-member meeting that we have every 3 months or so with GMTU. We basically just have a meeting to do democracy. So to
what's GMTU?
GMTU, in case you don't know, is Greater Manchester Tenants Union. It's the tenants union that I'm part of. I'm doing the committee. I'm on the committee, and we tried to get more people on the committee. That's basically what we were trying to do. We didn't do that well, unfortunately, because some of the roles that we have at the moment that are going on the committee are quite full on. We have a treasurer role going, and to be the treasurer on the committee of GMTU basically means that you make sure all the staff get paid and all the other stuff that we pay for happens, and organizing bank accounts and all that. There's no way I can do that. There's no way I'd step up and do that. I'm so shit at maths and money and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's no way. And I think a lot of people were a little bit overwhelmed by that. But the meeting itself went really well, and it was really, really good to see a bunch of people there. All member meetings don't really have as many people there as our annual general meeting, which we'll be having in a couple of weeks in June. But yeah, we got a really good turnout this last all member meeting, because normally we get maybe 10 or 15 people. There was easily 30 people in the room. So it felt more like an annual general meeting than an all member meeting. Which is a shame because we still didn't manage to recruit any people who wanted to be on the committee. We did, however, get some more people interested in doing activism with the union. So more people sort of came up to me because I just did a little sort of presentation and spoke about all the different roles, and I spoke about the member solidarity role because that's my role on the committee. And obviously there are people who do member solidarity, which is just basically helping people with their disputes against their landlords or their social housing provider. I explained a bunch about that. I was like, that is the bread and butter of the union. And if you want to get involved and do more activism and help people in your capacity as a tenant and show that solidarity, and did like a little mini explainer of solidarity and what it means to do member solidarity in a tenants union, because it's like, well, we're all terrified of getting a Section 21 notice, right? We're all terrified of getting a rent rise notice. We're all terrified of any of the things that come with being a tenant. Like literally, it's rough, right? It's a rough kind of world out there. So if you have spare time and you're able to like help people understand their rights, understand what landlords can and can't do, and you know, help people resist evictions and stuff, that's what solidarity is as a tenant, you know.
Awesome.
So that was good. Yeah, we got a couple of people from that, and that was the most base thing that I did. Not this week, kind of this week, a little bit before this week. But
are you feeling better, Mule? Lots of people want to know. Many people are asking. You are okay. Good.
Many people are asking. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. I'm a lot better. Yeah, I just had like some kind of rhinitis. Okay, like, you know, Tim and Sophie aren't here, so you know, maybe I can talk about this a little bit more. But I just find it like so absurd. You'll appreciate this, Kira, because we've spoken about COVID and stuff like that before on the show. And it's like, so I went to see like my stepmom and dad, and they'd been away on holiday, and they were like really excited to see me. They were like, come, let's go, we're gonna go to our favorite restaurant and it'd be really nice. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I've not seen you in a while, let's go. And you know, it was really nice and stuff, and I really appreciated the meal. They got me the meal and stuff, and it was great. But then, like, you know, at the end of the meal, like, you know, my stepmom's like, oh yeah, you know, just coming out the other end of this cold, and my dad's going, yeah, I think I'm getting this cold. And I'm like, you have a cold and you invited me out for a meal, like, why are we going outside? And they're there like getting really defensive, like, oh. And I was like, so, and my stepmom was like, you know, we got on the plane and someone just started coughing, and I thought, oh, that's it, we're fucked. And I'm sat there and I'm like, I'm genuinely like going it over in my head. Like, even if you don't think that we should be still wearing masks all the time in, like, you know, places like the supermarket or wherever you go and stuff like that, surely what you've learned from COVID is that, like, getting on a plane and wearing a mask, like, it's going to stop you from getting ill, probably, especially if it's like an N95. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just 2 hours of uncomfortableness, because that was what my stepmom said. She was like,
not even uncomfortable.
It's not even uncomfortable.
It's literally nothing.
I know.
Can we please?
I literally, she was like, oh, it's just really uncomfortable. I don't like wearing it. But even if you think it's uncomfortable, the logic doesn't make sense, right? Because if it's uncomfortable for 2 hours, would you rather be uncomfortable for 2 hours or uncomfortable for a whole fucking week and potentially make your friends and loved ones uncomfortable for a week? It's like such a simple...
And disable them potentially, or kill them.
Exactly, right.
And then other people also disabled or killed. Exactly.
Like, this is the thing. So it stressed me out, but fortunately it was just rhinitis, you know, like when you it was like some virus, some cold or something, and it's obviously like got into my sinuses, and just nasty stuff for a week. But I'm doing fine now. Thank you very much for asking. But yeah, there you go. Like, you know, another example, like, you know, of like just how easy it is to like not make someone else sick. Just, you know, wear a mask. Like, it's not hard, you know. Hell.
Yep.
Anyway, that's
also
that.
I need to also remind people that many people, including many of our audience members, are immunocompromised. So it's important to also, it's not just about thinking of like a person with a normal, quote unquote, baseline and how they're affected. There's also people that are very immunocompromised or can't get vaccinated for reasons. There are actual people that cannot receive vaccinations, not because they're, you know, QAnoners, but because of immunocompromised reasons, or from some sort of particular situation medically, or they're going through, say, chemotherapy or something. Like, there's lots of different things that prevent people from getting vaccinated. So please give fucks about others. I know this should be a no-brainer considering the audience that is listening right now, but you would be surprised as to how many people just would like to tweet the tweet and talk the talk, but can't be bothered to put a piece of fabric in front of their faces.
Oh, so many people like to tweet the tweet. And that's not even about this. That's just in general.
Well, like, I just don't see how, like, when we're talking like revolution, we're talking about solidarity, we're talking about people, you know, making difficult decisions in order to better the world. And then I see those same people that pretend that they're about that, not willing to put a piece of fabric in front of their face. It makes me a little jokerfied. And so please don't make me joker. I'm a little, I don't want a joker. Don't do it. Be considerate.
If your solidarity does not include disabled people, immunocompromised people, then it means nothing. And that is a fact. But speaking of our viewers, we do have a based viewer, Marion. Marion says, the most base thing I did this week was co-hosting a workshop on tenant organizing at the Montreal Anarchist Book Fair. That sounds really, really awesome. The workshop was hosted by the Montreal Autonomous Tenants Union, which I had joined a year ago because of Red Planet. Thank you so much for having me to do this. Yeah, well, that is super based, Marion. And yeah, holy shit. Like, I genuinely, like, it's when I hear that someone's joined like a tenants union as well, specifically, obviously that warms my heart because, I love housing activism. I think it's like really, really good. It's really important. Everybody needs a house, and I think that it's just so important. Yeah, and it's really cool that you're like you've not just joined a tenants union. You've gone out there and you've gone like, right, I'm gonna use some of my free time, my solidarity time to like
so cool
run a workshop. Yeah, really awesome stuff, Marion. So thanks so much for submitting that.
So we want to know what base things y'all have been doing, just like Marion submitted their what they did. You can also be featured on the show. So you can message us on Twitter, on Instagram, or on TikTok, or you can send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. And you can include your name and pronouns if you want, if you're cool with that. But if you want to be anonymous, you can also do that. Whatever you're comfortable with. We just want to be able to showcase what more of y'all are doing, because what you're all doing is really, really cool and really inspiring. So thank you, Marion, and send us your base stuff.
Yeah, the point of this show is to inspire people to go out and do stuff. So if you're going out and you're doing stuff, we want to hear about that. And if it becomes so much that you are actively organizing and running and leading an organization or like taking part in a lot of actions, we're also going to want to speak to you. We're also going to want to speak to you. We might have you on the show. Yeah. So there's always that to consider as well. But with all that stuff out of the way, Kira, you've got some news to talk to us about, and I think we have a audio clip to listen to.
Yeah, I want to first prep for what this is. So lots of news to go over. In Georgia, where Cop City is being constructed, bail fund organizers were arrested in Georgia. And there's also police transcripts that reveal that this is part of a larger conspiracy, which surprises none of us. None of us are under the impression that the police, when they're retaliating against protesters, against peaceful occupiers of the forest that are trying to resist the building of Cop City, where none of us are under the impression that this is just a bunch of do-gooder cops trying to just uphold the letter of the law. Which by the way is still fascism. But this is clearly a part of a larger conspiracy to thwart any sort of like opposition to the building of Cop City. And now we have audio recording that confirms this. But before we get to that recording, I would like to describe a little bit more about this. So the police SWAT team raided a home in Atlanta on Wednesday and arrested 3 organizers with the Atlanta Solidarity Fund. So this is a nonprofit organization that's been raising money to bail out protesters, so a bail fund. Protesters that are opposing the construction of the Cop City. And if you don't know what Cop City is, it's this massive police training facility. It's basically like it's like a little like miniature city that's been constructed with millions upon millions of dollars, purely not to house people. And while there's a housing crisis, by the way, where there's a homelessness crisis in America, people are desperate. None of this is going to be used to house people. It's going to be used purely so cops can train to become better fascists, right? So lawyers have described the raids and the arrests of these bail fund organizers as being unprecedented. The raid on the bail fund comes as 42 activists face domestic terrorism charges for opposing Cop City. The Atlanta City Council is expected to hold a key vote on Cop City on June 5th, so in a couple days. The city recently admitted that the public cost of the project will top $67 million, which is twice as high as originally stated. And you can only imagine like how much better those funds could be put to use, other than building a little fascist Sim City to practice your fascist techniques and tactics, right? So getting to the audio clip, on the same day as the raid, shortly after the raids, audio recording of the police discussing the raid reveals, to no one's surprise, that the police have been conspiring to take down the Stop Cop City movements. And one of the cops even goes so far as to talk about how they're trying to get more overtime because they're trying to get their backyard done. So I think we're going to cut to the audio.
Anybody else think that that warrant that they served today and the arrests are just guaranteed shenanigans next Monday and Tuesday?
Yep. Actually, maybe tomorrow. I think they're supposed to have their first appearance tomorrow.
I'm here for all of it. Matter of fact, just do it all June. Trying to get my backyard done.
I mean, it could go the opposite way. I mean, we've been putting pressure on them and attacking them from all different angles. At some point, they've got to give up. I mean, especially if we're going after all the money. It could shut them down.
Yeah, I'm just waiting. Like, couldn't they wait until, like, Wednesday of next week to do this?
Is that when you're off?
No, that's when all this, the finance committee would have been done. Would have been done by Wednesday.
Okay. Oh, no, they had to send a message.
I get it, but I mean, think about it. If they had just defeated the thing in council, which, they're finally going to vote for the money and everything's going to go through, and then the coup de grace is, right after you failed 2 days in a row, we serve a warrant on you.
True, that's what they did the last go around. I guess they wanted to, go ahead and get it over with. I guess they thought it was going on in the offensive.
All right.
Love
so
that.
Yeah,
Great.
super duper. Yeah, cops are scum, all of them, each and every one of them. And
even your mate who's a cop, even
your uncle, that nice uncle that got you that cool Christmas present when you were 4, even he sucks. Even he's a fucking fascist.
Right.
Anyways, solidarity with all protesters against for protesters that are protesting the creation of Cop City. It's just a fucking revolting fascist state here in America.
For real.
I don't really know how else to even like respond to all this.
Yeah. It's hard because it's like it's just so blatant. And I mean, I was looking through like the comments for this particular audio that I found on Twitter, and there was liberals that were like really upset. But I'm hoping that one day they'll stop saying that, it's American cops that are bad, or it's the Georgia cops that are bad, and just start to understand that it's the state that's bad, right? Yeah. Like it doesn't matter how you dress it up, doesn't matter what state, what literal state in the United States of America is bad. It's like the actual structure of the state. It's the creation of laws to facilitate and justify violence and the monopolization of violence, and to maintain the class-based oppression. Like I'm hoping and praying that at the very least this type of thing will maybe start to spark some people, Yeah, at the end of the day, the more and more that you see, like, this is why class consciousness and class solidarity is so important, because liberals tend to be people who are either like, I don't know, working class, but don't have the time to like absorb politics. Do you know what I mean? So they just kind of fall into the neoliberal pool, or middle class people, right? And the more and more that like, the middle class becomes thinner, and more and more people get pushed out of it because the material conditions of capitalism get worse and worse and worse, the more and more that they'll realize, oh, wait a second, the police suck and they don't do anything good for us. It's like really, it's really hard to like push that narrative when people have never had an experience with the police, right? If you've never been at a protest and you've never had a policeman like grab you, do you know what I mean? And the way that they grab you, because like if anyone's ever been at a protest and have like a police officer assault them, they'll know what I'm talking about. They just treat you like fucking objects. It's like they will grab you with such force and like try and like, you know, they're just violent bastards basically. Unless you've like experienced that, sometimes it's hard to like tell people like, you know, what bastards cops are.
Especially when so many people, like you were talking about, like are maybe like middle class and all they have is all the fear mongering of what the poor are going to do to them. And so they think in their mind, and they also watch stuff like Law and Order, which, you know, propaganda that at the end of every one of those shows, the only feeling you have is, thank God cops exist.
Right. Yeah. They're like,
So
oh my
like,
God. Yeah, these serial killers living around the corner from me. Oh man, it's so good that cops exist, and they'll just stop all those serial killers, even though it's so bizarre, isn't it? Because it's like, even if you really like, and I used to believe this too. I used to think like, oh yeah, cops, we need cops, because what about serial killers?
Yeah,
but, like,
I did too.
Cops,
most people did.
Yeah, but like, you know, cops only stop serial killers after they're learning that they're serially killing people.
Yeah,
like,
if you ever call a cop and say this person's threatening me, they're gonna be like, okay, well, call us when you're dead, or call us when you have like an actual physical injury.
Exactly.
And then maybe we'll care. But even then they might not care. It really depends on who you are, what your demographic is, like how connected you are, who's deciding to pick up the phone that day, you know?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Anyway.
Fuck cops, each and every one of them. But my sweet mule, could you tell me about what's going on with in London with regards to riot police?
I can indeed. So there is a autonomous housing group, and I will get you the name of those forthwith, but basically they squatted a ex-convent, Sisters of Mercy convent. Autonomous Winter Shelter squatted this convent that basically used to run on the grounds that they would like help homeless people. It was supposed to be a homeless shelter, but I believe this is a paraphrased history of what happened, but the homeless people in London would show up to the convent and be like, yeah, we need housing, and they would be like, no. And then it just kind of shut down and stopped working. And then some really based squatters, the Autonomous Winter Shelter, popped in and were like, you know what, we're going to make this an actual homeless shelter. And the difference between this and like the way that like a lot of squats sort of operate is that like you will find that sometimes squats operate in a bizarre fashion, and it may seem a little, I don't know what the word is, a little lib to some people, but when you like deal with people with addiction issues, and when you deal with people with like housing issues, sometimes you have to make decisions like, we can't have addicts staying here. And it's not a we don't like addicts, it's we don't have the resources to deal with addicts kind of thing. But the difference between this squat and most squats that you would find in and around most city centres in the UK is that they would let anybody come in. Didn't matter if they were addicts, didn't matter if they were any kind of like, you know, issue that they had. Like, it was a homeless shelter for homeless people, and that was the end of it basically. And lots of squatters would like come in and spend their time there and do work there for people. But what happened, this was this week, I believe this was literally on Thursday. Yeah, it was Thursday this week. Yeah. So dozens of Met Police officers basically turned up. I think there were about 100 police officers present, according to this one LBC article. And you know, it's this is just another example. You know, we're going hard on ACAB, we're going hard on 1312 on this episode,
but we're not trying to.
We're not even trying to. We're not even trying to.
We're just reporting the news to you. It's not our fault.
It's like this is like
trying to tell you what's going on, and it just happens to be cops are scum.
Yeah.
So you know,
well, it's not even biased. It's literally like this is what happened. These cops have shown up to a homeless shelter.
100 of them. Like, we can't just ignore them. Be like, oh, we're really, we don't want to be mean to you. Just 100 of you standing outside. We're just, no, you gotta. You're making it
Literally.
very hard to ignore how scummy you are. So
Yeah, 100 of them, all decked out in riot gear, turned up at this homeless shelter and just dragged these people out,
just like Jesus would do.
Exactly. So, you know, it's just vile shit. And, you know, I'll never forget the experience that I had when I was on an eviction resistance. I probably spoke about it on Red Planet, but like we were, you know, the guy that we were protecting was a war veteran. He had like a lot of mental health problems and addiction problems and stuff. And, you know, we were saying to the police, we were like, yo, listen, you're breaking the law, innit? Like, you might not know this, but you're breaking the law. And they just don't care, do they? Because they're coppers. So, you know, they pushed us out of the way. They broke into this gaff. And, you know, this guy was like, they, you know, when they saw that the guy's gaff wasn't like a crack den, they saw that it was just like a normal guy. You know what I mean? Like, just terrified to be made homeless. And we're there saying, like, you know, do you feel good about yourselves, lads? Do you feel good about doing this? And they're there going, oh, you act like we like doing it. And it's like, oh, just get another job, you dickhead. Literally, just get another job. You know, like, I have no idea how not a single one of these fuckers, like, felt sheepish about this. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, we do know that there have been reports, because we reported on this on Red Planet, right, in the UK, that like the number of cops like recruited is at like an all-time low versus like leaving the force. And I think that is in part due to this is in the UK, by the way. This is just in the UK. Not sure if this is the case in the States or anything, but this is, I think, in part due to like the really bad press that the cops have been getting. And this is, I think this was even before the there was a report that they did where they found that the Met Police were like institutionally racist, homophobic, misogynist, all this stuff. But anyway, you know, it's just vile. It's vile shit. Every single one of these bastards is just, anyway, I'm not going to say any more about that. That's what they did. They evicted a bunch of homeless people, and you know, they were hurting them. They were actually hurting them. They were literally like, you know, being so violent with them. And they will have used the excuse that like, oh, they were getting, you know, aggressive or whatever. But would you not get aggressive? Like, would you not get aggressive if a copper came in, if you're homeless and you have this like beautiful, sweet, amazing place where people are like using their humanity to make your life better, and all of a sudden the state shows up to like fuck that shit up, how are you not going to get mad at that? How is anybody not going to get upset? How is anybody not going to get you know, want to defend that? How is that? How can you possibly? Do you know what I mean?
Not only, but it's not even just being upset. It's also when the state removes your housing, that is violence.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just a bummed
You're resisting violence. Yeah.
Yeah, you're resisting necessarily what is violence. Like, this is not a hypothetical. This is actual, in the moment, is violence. Sometimes it's like I have a hard time. Like, I have this thing in my head that thinks like it represents violence or something. No, it is violence to be taken from your home and to not have a home. Like, that is in fact violence.
Those cops that put that guy I was just talking about onto the streets, when they found out that, you know, the council didn't have his name on the register, like these housing association people were saying, like, oh, he's on the homeless register. We rang up and found out that it wasn't. And we were telling him, we were saying, you've just given someone a death sentence. You've taken him out of the home. It was -degree weather. Like, that is a death sentence. You're killing someone by doing that. You're actually just killing a guy, you know, especially someone who's got addiction problems. Like, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to want to score. They're going to want to get fucked up, because how else are you going to sleep on the streets? How else, what else are you going to do? Like, you don't know anyone, you got no family and shit like that. That is a death sentence, you know? So anyway, this is just, again, not even trying. Obviously, I'm being extremely biased. I fucking hate cops, but you can see why, right? You can see why. So yeah, again, ACAB 1312, not even trying to, you know, make this about cops, but they just made it about themselves. Let's face it, chat. They've made it about themselves. But speaking about more cops, Kira, do you want to tell us about how some German anti-fascists were treated this week?
Yeah, sure. So German anti-fascists were convicted for a series of attacks on neo-Nazis. And I love the DW headline for this. I'm going to read it. Left-wing extremist Lena E. has been found guilty in a German court of leading a series of violent attacks on neo-Nazis. The sprawling trial has sparked controversy and fears of extremism driven by leftist ideology.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
We here at the Red Planet Show embrace leftist ideology, but do not embrace any violent attacks in the name of it. It makes us sad and we cry off stream.
That's true.
I just want to let you all know that. We don't do it on stream though, because we're professionals. But off stream, off the show, we're weeping when we hear about people, beating up neo-Nazis in the name of leftist ideology. But I'm still going to report the story. 28-year-old German student Lena E. was found guilty of founding a quote-unquote criminal organization and committing 6 serious attacks on neo-Nazis. Oh, no. Apparently, this type of behavior is unusual in Germany, is what the story says. I'm not... I don't know what to do with that.
It's so fucked. It's so fucked. I don't know about you, yeah. I don't know about you, but there was like a moment when I started to get radicalized politically, and finding out that like there are still people who are actually Nazis in the world. And I was like, that's bad enough. But then when you find out that there are like Nazis in Germany, that's like a mind-blowing moment. It's like, did you not learn? Like, do you not understand? Like, anyway, it was just...
I remember this. I know it's so funny to think back. I remember when I learned there was still, because I'm not Jewish, learning that there was like still Nazis, there's still anti-Semites. I was just like, okay, I always envisioned in my little cute little, I don't know anything about politics brain. I envisioned some like underground organization where there's like some, they're wearing ripped stuff and like, they never see the light of day or something. Like, I can understand that those ideologies might exist there. Like, with like a steel door to open a thing and say the password. Like, that's the way that I envision these organizations if they ever existed. I didn't know that like they actually like were just people like walking around that are like still like just thinking Nazis had great ideas and the Jewish people are like controlling the world like a puppeteer. Like it so blew cringe. My mind when I know extremely privileged position, right? But like it was I remember that like wake up where I was like, what? I thought whenever people like are using analogies, they're like, then they throw in Nazi or throw in Hitler. It's because we all agree that's bad.
Right. Right. It's just so.
But
so
here we
bizarre.
are.
Here we
are.
Anyway.
In Germany, there's neo-Nazis, and so the German courts, the German police had to take those people in and go, wow, we're the police and we don't enjoy when you beat up neo-Nazis, so we're going to make sure that you see justice. So Lena E. and her 3 co-defendants carried out a series of attacks on neo-Nazis between 2018 and 2020. And they're, so the group around Lena E is believed to have been very well organized. And they use, according to some people, like this one academic talked about it, and he was calling them a terrorist organization. And this is terrorism, whatever. Part of his report, he was talking about how they used disposable phones and they had spies that were spying on like the different quote unquote victims, aka Nazis, which is just, it sounds like they also learn like combat techniques to learn how to like properly like best take down Nazis. So looks like this left-wing extremist organization was doing some very effective things to which we of course do not endorse here at Red Planet.
No, don't do any of that.
We're very sad to hear this. We weep. So they raided a well-known neo-Nazi bar in late 2019 and attacked this like neo-Nazi named like Leon, who's a very like apparently very well-known notorious neo-Nazi in the area, attacked him with hammers and batons. And when that initial attack failed, the group attacked him again a few weeks later outside of his car. And the other neo-Nazis they left with broken bones and other injuries. So when the defendants entered the courtroom, apparently they got like a really positive reception, which is, what? A very positive reception, a huge round of applause from a ton of people. Everyone was standing, giving like a standing ovation with the exception of like the judge and like the journalists. And as soon as the sentence was read, the sentence of like, okay, these people are in trouble, the gallery began chanting leftist messages of support. And the judge called for quiet so he can read out his reasoning. saying anyone who's interested in hearing why the verdict was the way it was can stay. And someone immediately shouts, because you're fascist friends. And others called out, fucking class justice. So, you know.
It's just so fucked. It's so fucked.
Lena E. Oh yeah, so Lena E. was sentenced to 5 years and 3 months in prison, but later on she was told that she would only have to return to jail if she loses an appeal. So now she's out and she has to do like this parole thing until that happens. And her 3 male co-defendants were sentenced about 3 years in prison each. So it was really gross to read like this snooty academics commentary on this, talking about how, well, they were targeting people based on politics and making their lives difficult. So that's technically terrorism. And, you know, we don't stand for that, and so forth. And the judge was trying to justify his decision by saying, we also do stuff against far right organizations. But I think we all understand that there is a pretty notable difference between those two, especially in Germany. You would think that they would understand this. But of course, you know, capitalism is not interested in understanding such disparities.
It is just such an absolutely bizarre thing to think about. It's like, okay, so Germany, the country where the Nazis happened, and there were anti-fascists back then. That's where anti-fascism comes from. And, you know, well, obviously you could argue that anti-fascism comes from lots of different pre-colonial indigenous countries, but, you know, sort of like what is considered like, you know, the communist anti-fascist wing of Europe comes from 1930s Germany, where the Nazis were, you know, rising. And of course, they were being anti-fascist back then. They were being called terrorists back then. They were getting arrested back then. They were getting put in prison back then, all by the same kind of liberals who were like putting anti-fascists in prison nowadays for attacking Nazis, right? It's like,
in my community, we have a movie. We watch movies together, and we watched Cabaret recently, which I never saw before, and it was really interesting how, because it's during like the rise of like the Nazis. Before the Nazis were like the Nazis, but they're like brown shirts and they're wearing their little their little like armbands, and they're, you know, doing the brown shirt shit.
Yeah.
And during the movie, one of the characters is like, no, first we're going to allow the Nazis to get rid of the communists, but because we can handle the Nazis, right? We can control them. And at a certain point in the movie, like this one Nazi youth or whatever stands up and gives this like sings this really creepy nationalistic song, and everyone starts standing up, and one of the characters is like, "You still think you can control them?" And that's just like that's just. I feel like we're kind of seeing the same type of shit.
Yeah,
like communists are the anti-fascists.
Yeah,
that's that if you don't want fascism, stop putting communists in prison when they're fighting fascists.
Yeah, it's like so like absurd that, you know. Anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because everyone can see how absurd it is. We got a lot of stuff to get through. We got a cool guest coming on in a bit.
This is very much a Mule and Kira stream.
It's a Mule and Kira stream. Yeah. So we have got a new story. This is a very interesting one. This is the first I've read about this. So Xylazine. This is a drug that is apparently becoming the latest drug of choice for right-wing fearmongers in Britain. Now, what I think that means is that, you know, it sounds like right-wing fearmongers. So, you know, people like who are on talk shows who are like telling people to be scared of migrants and stuff like that. I don't know if it's them. I think it's probably just more likely it's the it's the drug of choice for just right wingers, basically. But essentially, a recent report in the Sunday Times warned of a flesh-eating zombie drug. They always do this, by the way. They always genuinely do this whenever like a new drug comes out, like bath salts or something like that. It's just like the most absurd fear-mongering about this kind of stuff. The Sunday Times is a rag. Don't worry about it. It's fine. They claim is responsible for the death of a British man infiltrating the UK. Oh, no, hang on a minute. Wait. The death of a British man? Okay, I'm not understanding this news story that well. But anyway, it says here that the drug Xylazine is a sedative typically administered to animals with some similarity to blood pressure medications used by people. When used with benzos and opioids, it can prolong the effects of those drugs. Xylazine has been found to be added to street drugs in the United States for the last few years. The Times article inaccurately suggests that Xylazine was responsible for the deaths of Carl Warburton, a 43-year-old man from Smith's Wood. Death certificates records indicate that while Xylazine was present, the main cause of death was determined to be a combination of heroin, fentanyl, and cocaine. So actually, that is what the headline is. It is actually the Sunday Times is trying to like fearmonger about this new drug. So that is actually what it is. So while it's true that Xylazine has begun entering the UK, it does not eat flesh. I'm pretty sure that's probably obvious to everyone.
Mule is not a doctor. Neither am I. However.
No.
However, our best bet is,
yeah, it's quite obvious that like it's not going to be like, it's just so absurd. Xylazine is commonly injected, which narrows blood vessels, causing abscesses and ulcers around the injection point that can be slow to heal. The article represents the latest example of demonizing drug users and addicts, and it's a reminder to test your drugs. So you may remember that we did a harm reduction stream a couple of, well, it might even be a year ago now, just talking about drugs and how, like, you know, yes, there are definitely drugs out there that are dangerous, but guess what? Alcohol is a drug. If you drink too much of that, you'll fucking die, and that's legal. So, you know, what's important, whether something is legal or not, or whether you know how to take it properly, safely, and make sure that you are testing it to see if it is properly the drug that you think it is. So always important to remember that. Yeah, sorry for getting that wrong. Just got that headline a little bit wrong there. I thought that this was going to be one of those stories where it's like, oh, these you know, steroid head neo-Nazis in the UK that are just like, you know, using too many steroids, and they're also trying to use this like other thing to make them hench and swole and good at fighting. But it's not that. I thought it was something related to that. Anyway, Kira, we were talking about video games at the start of the stream, and you're obviously a gamer. So do you want to tell us about some based gamer news?
Sure. The most self-hating video gamers on the planet are organizing. Of course, I'm talking about League of Legends players. In a move never before seen in professional esports, the North American League of Legends Championship Series Players Association, otherwise known as NALCSPA, has announced that the league's players have voted overwhelmingly in favor of a walkout. So they're not apparently able to strike for some reason. I'm not quite sure on the technical reasons why they chose a walkout, but they've organized in favor of a walkout. And this is a really big deal. This is this has never happened before. So why are they doing this? It's a little complicated explanation. I'm going to try to briefly explain, but if you don't quite understand, that's okay. I think it's most important to understand, though, that this is a show of not like, these aren't like workers that are like given like a paycheck, but these are like more of an informal, like contracted workers that are organizing a walkout in an industry that really doesn't ever see this type of like organized action, which is really cool to see. So Riot removed a requirement for orgs to field an academy team, and an academy is like a developmental league. And so most teams have immediately dropped their academy leagues, and this is like 7 of 10. And this puts, therefore, like many as like 70 players, coaches, and managers out of work. And this is happening all within a month before the start of the 2023 NACL summer split. If anyone knows what I'm talking about right now, then you know what I'm talking about. But this, I feel like we don't really need to go too much deep in the weeds. If you don't understand this, that's totally cool. Just know that this is like a really big blow to the North American league scene, is because without a strong academy league, it's much more difficult to develop talent. I was poking around in some forums, and I even heard that even aspiring players in America are being told because of this that they have to go play now in Europe's regional leagues so they can develop and then go back to America if they want to go like even higher. So it's not great, right? So there's a bunch of demands that the NALCSPA are asking for. For instance, allow the LCS orgs to partner with affiliates for cost sharing, committing to a revenue pool for player salaries, so on and so forth, a certain amounts. So very esportsy stuff. I'm not going to go into too much more of the gamery language, but it's cool to see that esports players are even embracing the spirit of unionization. Technically not a union, yes, true, but I still think it's still a show of like, instead of us kind of like isolating and just kind of taking on this burden of whatever stresses we're experiencing, or looking to our fellow workers, coaches, players, etc., that we are competing with, but seeing that they're struggling, we're going to actually like band together and do a walkout. I also personally think it's cool that, given that I've never was an esports player, but I did a lot of gaming before, and I have played with esports teams in the past, not as one of them, but like as like a buddy, but keeping up with them. So I got a chance to like know a lot of the politics and stuff. There's a sentiment in esports that like, if you're able to make it, that it's like a dream job. And this is very similar with a lot of entertainments and or gamer affiliated stuff, like being a Twitch streamer, that if you're in it, then you're blessed and you're living the dream, and you should never have any complaints whatsoever, or else you're spoiled and entitled and so on and so forth. So it's cool to see that same group is kind of being like, now we're not cool with actually what we're seeing, and we're going to actually organize a walkout. So that's pretty cool to see. And so, yeah.
I love it.
That's your gamer news.
Gamer news.
Yeah.
Just in time for Pride. Anyway, don't ask me where that came from. It's not even a joke. It's not even funny. Anyway, the next bit of the street, that's the news segment done, by the way. So well done, everyone.
Oh, and now that we have a few more minutes, I want to make sure that y'all know, and we'll go into more detail of this at the end of the stream, but if you would like to support more Red Planet shows, you want to make sure our producer Conrad keeps getting his gruel and gets his bucket seat that doubles as a bucket, things like that. Does not come free. That's not that requires funds. All right, if you want more Mule and Kira days like this,
that's right,
like the chaotic energy,
that's right,
make sure you visit our Patreon.
We couldn't have done this without Conrad. It would have fallen apart.
Really couldn't. Make sure you visit our Patreon, patreon.com/red_planet. Do it. You can become a member for as little as $2 a month, and it really, really helps us out. So thank you so much in advance. And yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mule and Kira Day.
It's Mule and Kira Day. Now, we have an excellent guest today, and we're going to start introducing them right now. Shall I do it? Shall you do it? It's up to you. I'm not bothered. Whatever you want.
You know what? I would love to hear your voice a little bit more.
Yes, you would, wouldn't you?
I think it's a fantastic voice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trans genocidal rhetoric has taken the United States and UK by storm in recent years, funded by right-wing organizations. These are the same groups who are also working to spread harmful misinformation and fear throughout the rest of the world, exploiting the culture wars to other nations to use as a political wedge issue, while trans and queer people in those communities experience greater discrimination and risk to life. Our guest today recently stood up against one such effort, disrupting an event in Tel Aviv where anti-trans author Abigail Schrier was promoting a book release. They were physically assaulted and restrained simply for standing up and speaking in a defiant tone toward the platformed transphobe. We're very proud to have the very based Ayelet with us today. Welcome in, Ayelet. Am I saying your name
Ayelet.
Right? Ayelet.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hearing you loud and clear. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Can you see me?
I cannot see you.
That is intriguing. You should be seeing me, and I don't like that.
Uh-oh. Hmm.
Maybe it's just a camera source or something's happening. No. Okay, it doesn't matter for now. If you wanna like check this out as we talk, that's absolutely fine. No problem whatsoever. But do you want to introduce yourself properly for everyone? Just to start?
Okay, yes. Hello. My name is Ayala. My Twitter is at Bambikubo. That's the only social media I have. I am an activist on the refuser network Mesarvot, which is a network of Israeli conscientious objectors who refuse to join the IDF, to which conscription is mandatory. I actually reached the attention of this podcast when a week ago I staged a protest outside Abigail Schrier's meeting or convention or whatever for her book Irreversible Damage, in which I entered and interrupted in the middle of when she was speaking,
which is super awesome and super based. So yeah, so that must have been really just intense, just in general, not just the act itself, but the lead up to it, knowing that you were going to do it, knowing what could have happened to you, you know, as a result of that. Can you like talk us through what kind of happened? Like, what was I guess like the whole story. You might as well tell us the whole story.
Okay, sure. Well, actually, while I was technically active in organizing the protest, I really wasn't the main person organizing it. That were my fantastic friends who are watching this stream, hopefully. They said they would be. I hope you are. Maya, if you're out there, thanks for that. And so they start organizing this protest. And it was really just like a bunch of trans kids that knew each other. A lot of us were in Mesarvot or in other things, and we just decided to help. Abigail Schrier is going to be there. She's spreading lies about us. We are the group affected by this, and we want to protest it. So we did that, and Maya at first suggested to me, hey, you know that thing that happened to Anita Bryant?
So if anyone is unaware of your queer history, Anita Bryant was basically the J.K. Rowling of her day, calling gay people, lesbians, pedophiles, groomers, all this kind of stuff unnatural. And someone, an extremely based person, gave her a cream pie to the face during one of her press conferences. So that's what I was referencing there. But yeah, go on if you want to continue.
Yeah. So you know, my friend Maya mentioned that to me, and I got, you know, thinking about, and I was also thinking about again that feminist protest with the Lavender Menace, with the women who entered the shirts declaring themselves as the Lavender Menace into a feminist conference which tried to ban lesbians, with the Lavender Menace being the word used to refer to lesbians. And I realized that, you know, entering a conference, entering that kind of situation, seeing the people that hate you and staring them in the face, it's an important political move. And so I decided, like, hell yeah, I'm gonna do it. Like, who's gonna stop me? Like, obviously I decided against pies or violence of any kind.
But they still responded violently toward you.
Sorry, can you repeat yourself?
Yeah, they still, even though you decided not to do anything violent, even as, you know, quote unquote violent as like a cream pie, they still violently restrained you. They still acted very violently towards you. Like they grabbed you and they pulled you to the floor and dragged you. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, that obviously, but let's be completely honest. Everyone knew that would happen. A little bit of context. I did this, and then 2 days later, I posted it in a thread to Twitter. I have like 100 followers on Twitter, so not that many people saw it on Twitter. Except for the fact that the fantastic, beloved transphobe Posey Parker retweeted it and sicked mob on me. Followed immediately by fantastic pick-me transgender, sorry, not man, female living as a man, Buck Angel, doing the same. So obviously that immediately occurred, and keep people, among a bunch of different things, people kept asking me, like, what did you expect? As if they think that I'm surprised that I was treated by violence. Like, no, I'm not surprised. It's bad anyway, but no, I'm not fucking surprised. The point was to show that these people who claim that they just care about us, that they just care about the children, that they just care about those poor innocent girls who are being mutilated, which, to be clear, I am, as a 17-year-old trans masc non-binary person, am the person they're talking about. And just how obvious that lie is, because the moment we bother them, they will immediately treat us with immense, intense violence. They don't fucking care about the children, especially not the trans children. They were yelling at me and claiming that I was a disease, and so that one of them shouted at me, "You're still a freak," while dragging me out. They don't fucking care about us. Yeah.
No, that's horrific. Yeah, it's really hope inspiring. It's a lot of hopium to hear that, like, you are the target of the kind of rhetoric that is being used all over the world to try and roll back queer rights, and you've stood up against it, as anyone would do. Do you know what I mean? Anyone who can is gonna do this. Like, I think that's what people forget. I think that's what everybody who is sort of like standing aside and not really doing anything about this is unaware of, is that, like, more and more young people are gonna start putting their, not just like reputations, but their lives on the line to fight for this stuff that they know is right. It's incredibly hope inspiring. Like, it's, the fact that, like, you were able to go and do that, and it's just really, really awesome. And I think, like, I'm speaking for everybody who's listening now when I say, like, you did a really awe-inspiring thing, like a really awesome thing. But, like, so, you said that it was like a non-violent thing. I'm assuming you went in there and you just disrupted the protest, right?
Well, it was so this person was trying to do a nice calm transphobia, and so Ayelet shows up and basically stands up and just starts talking for a second, and wasn't even like nothing even controversial. Just the mere act of, just, in my opinion, Ayala, you can totally tell me if I'm wrong, but the mere act of standing up and just existing as trans in front of a transphobe who's trying to just have a calm transphobia day was enough. That was enough to be a cause for violent retaliation.
Well,
that's my read on it.
I have a goal to be as fair as possible to whom I'm speaking towards. So I will say this: I stood up, and for some reason, despite obviously eyeing up me up before I did this, because I was like one of 3 teenagers in the room, they let me sit down next to the speakers. And the first thing I did when I stood up was I shut off the mics. I shut off their speakers. So yeah, that's an obtrusive act I did. And the other thing is I spoke directly to Schrier, and I will say I walked towards her. It was also towards the center of the room and the stage, but I did walk towards her. In fact, I was trying to prove that she wouldn't be willing to shake my hand. I introduced myself. I said, "Hello, Mrs. Schrier, would you be willing to?" I couldn't finish that sentence because I was attacked before I could finish, but I was trying to prove that she wouldn't shake my hand, and she didn't. So,
yeah.
And yeah, so, like, I also, you can't see this in any of the videos, but I was holding a trans flag that was still folded up, but it was grabbed from me the moment I stood up. So yeah, that you can't see in any videos. So I would disagree with framings of the event in which I was just kind of there and they attacked me, like unprovoked. No, I was being provocative, and that was the point. The point that at, you know, the slightest provocation of one of the kids they claim to be defending being disrespectful toward them, they'd go full, let's drag them across the floor.
Yeah, and point proven, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, it's just absolutely horrible. Like what you must have gone through with, like you say, Book Angel, Posey Parker, you know, harassing you on the internet and stuff like that. That must have just been really, really nasty. And in terms of like, I guess, you know, what kind of, I guess what kind of response there's been. Like, we don't really need to, I guess, unless there's been anything new that you've noticed from like the rhetoric that we see all the time on the internet about, you know, trans people, Twitter especially, unfortunately, it gets worse and worse and worse nowadays. But like, you know, there's no way that this is going to be framed as, you know, bad on the part of the transphobes, right? There's going to be like very few of them sitting down and admitting, hang on a minute, this is wrong. Why did we do this? Unless you've seen anything like that, Ayelet?
Well, no. Okay, several things. Okay. So first of all, yeah, obviously there wasn't anything new. And no, obviously none of them sat and reflected. Insane transphobes on the internet don't sit and reflect. But I will point out one thing that I had never experienced before, and I'm sure many others have, which is I was aware of it in theory, but I'd never seen it played out in practice, which is every single one, or almost every single one of the people replied to me gendered me as a man. Now, I'm not a man, and by their theory, I should not be gendered as a man since, you know, I'm transmasc. But vitally, despite both my age and my gender and the way they claim to perceive my gender identity, I should not be a man. But I am, because trans people's gender is entirely conditional, is what is more convenient for transphobes framing. Trans people will be men when they must be framed as violent criminals, and genderless children or girls when they must be framed as victims. When I do something in which they attack me, so they must proclaim me as a threat, then bam, suddenly I'm a man. Despite the fact that in my videos you see multiple times them pulling at my clothes and like seeing my chest binder and stuff like that, making it very obvious my assigned gender at birth. But despite all that, despite the fact that they're very aware of my assigned gender at birth, nope. For the intents of this reaction, I must be a man in order to justify their behavior. And obviously you see this a lot of the ways in the same, trans women in general are claimed to be predatory men, no matter, you know, how old they are or when they transition or whatever, unless they detransition, and then when talking about their past self, they're like, oh no, a poor child tricked. There's no honest view on the gender of trans people. There's no constant. Trans people are whatever gender is convenient in order to frame them as a problem.
Of course, absolutely. So just sort of I guess moving on from that, because I mean, what else can you say? Like you did a really awesome based thing. We're all incredibly proud of you. Like as an older queer person, it's just like so inspiring. Do you know what I mean? Like I think like one of the things that I think about a lot of the time is how hard it was for me to come out. Like I only came out when I was 29. Do you know what I mean? And I think like seeing younger queer people doing this amazing stuff, it gives me a lot of hope for younger queer people. So yeah, it's really cool to see. And I guess like, yeah, we're going to be talking to you more about Mesarvot. Is that how you say that? Am I saying that right?
No. Okay, well, several things. I will now reach the pronunciation part. First of all, my name is pronounced Ayelet, as in Ayelet.
Ayelet, yeah.
Yeah, that's part one, and it's Mesarvot. In Hebrew, this means we refuse. It's specifically female gender, because in Hebrew, almost every word has a gender. So it's We Refuse Collective Female. And yes, it is an organization of conscientious objectors. Within Israel, there is mandatory enlistment to the IDF. For girls, it is 2 years, and for boys, it is 2 years and 8 months. And yeah, Mesarvot refuses to participate in the IDF on moral grounds. Obviously, each individual person might have their each individual claims. Some people refuse because they're generally pacifists. Some people refuse specifically because of the occupation that yesterday was marked as the 56th anniversary of, which is to say specifically the occupation of the West Bank and the siege / violence within the Gaza Strip. And others will say that it's general anti-Zionism and not simply the occupation. It's a movement that includes people of many stripes. I personally am generally an anti-Zionist.
Cool. And this is something that I'm only tangentially aware of because I know someone that refused to take part in the IDF conscription, and they were put in prison for like 6 months or something. I can't remember, but there's like an extreme penalty for it, right?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you tell me their name, I probably know them, because a lot of us talked. I mean, they're presumably in Mesarvot, maybe they weren't. But okay, so the IDF has a complicated system in which it obviously can't actually make everyone join, because that's every young person every year. It's too many people. So that's on one hand, but on the other hand, it doesn't want to not let people join. So the system that has is that there are quite a few ways in which you can be released while technically still making their image look good. For example, it's considered relatively easy to get released on health charges, specifically mental health charges, because they don't want people to actually go to prison for refusing, because that makes them look bad. But they're aware that if they don't allow that, people will go to prison for refusing. I specifically, all of this is mildly irrelevant to me because the IDF doesn't really enlist trans people, which is to say it does, but you have to convince them to enlist you and not the other way around. For most of people, they have to convince the IDF that they're not fit for duty. But if you're trans, you're automatically sent to the mental health facilities. I don't know if this is actual ruling, but it's true for every single trans person I've spoken to. And
by the way, Israel is the mecca for queer liberation, apparently.
Yeah, obviously. And
Anyways,
and that's why queer Palestinians are blackmailed and killed for their identity. Yeah, because it's so darn progressive. Yeah.
God. Anyways, I'm sorry to cut you off. You were saying.
Oh yeah, so like obviously I'm not too sad about it. I think it's good that trans people aren't enlisted because I think it's better if more people aren't enlisted. I think that would be good. But it means that me specifically, despite, at the beginning of my journey having plans of like refusing and going to prison and being able to make it a political statement, it is not something I will personally be able to do. But obviously I have many friends who will go that route. And yes, on that topic, when you refuse, if you refuse and you don't try to get out through mental health institutions or through, there's something called the Conscientious Committee, in which you must basically prove you're a pacifist and therefore must be allowed to let out. If you aren't released through either of those two things or don't want to be released through either of those two things, you can say, fuck it. Show up to the IDF on the day you're supposed to enlist, say, I'm not going anywhere. You will be put in prison for any time between 90 to 120 days on average. There have been people who have been way more. There have also been people who are way less, but that's generally the idea. These are not consecutive days. People have not been put in prison for consecutive days since the early 2000s, in which they sentenced some people to 3 straight consecutive years in prison for refusing. But that received a bunch of international attention, and since then it's been generally up to 120 years, and it's in turn. So first you're put in prison for like 2 weeks, and then you're released, and they ask you if you're ready to enlist now. And if you say no again, you're sentenced again to 2 weeks. And if you say no again after that, you're sentenced to 3 weeks, and then attack until you fulfill your time and are released for bad behavior.
That is legitimately like torture. That's like, put you in the box. Okay, you ready? Like, I was watching Tank Girl last night. I know this is an absurd thing to bring up, but like, I really like the movie Tank Girl. I think it's really cool. But like, in fucking Tank Girl, like, that's what the evil villain does to Tank Girl. Like, puts her in this like cold room for a week and then gets her out and says, are you ready to work for me now? That's literally what the fucking IDF do. It's so fun to children as well, to literal like teenagers. It's just like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Sorry, I just had to interject there because that is like legitimately like evil villain shit. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, I have not seen the movie Tank Girl, and I will say 2 things. First of all, I guess fortunately, because that would be truly torture, it is not solitary confinement. People are put in military prison, which is an absurd mind game. It's this weird cross between boot camp and civilian prison. It's, according to people I know who've been there, it's a bizarre situation. Lots of people go to military prison for like a week or two because of doing shit like smoking on watch, or minor infractions. A lot of people go because they don't show up to army for some reason. Both for, sometimes because of logistical reasons, because the IDF is a massive bureaucratic organization that cannot get its shit together. It's so weird to say this because obviously it's a very efficient killing machine, but it's not efficient at anything else.
Wow.
And so yeah, lots of people fell through the cracks and then got screwed over and went to prison. And also people who like are more poor, they just couldn't afford, because you're not really paid for being in the IDF. You're paid like 1,000 shekels, which is, a shekel is like 4 of those are $1, if I remember my conversions. Like, that's the amount you get per month, which is not a lot of money. And if your family is very poor and needs you to work, well then screw you, you can't do that. So obviously, like, a lot of disenfranchised people end up in military prison that way.
Wow.
And so that's, women's prison from what I've heard. Men's prison, like, they're both military prison. Men's is more complicated because there's also weapons dealers and rapists there. But yeah, that's it for the most of it. Yeah.
Madness. It's just really, really like, trying to wrap your head around, this kind of scenario where you are, I guess, told to believe it. I guess it's exactly the same as growing up in neoliberal UK kind of thing where you think like, oh, our country's really good and we do loads of good stuff, and then like the more and more that you like learn about what's going on, you go, oh, actually no, this is terrible and terrible things are happening. But I think it just happens like obviously a lot faster in Israel, because probably one of the first questions that you ask your parents is like, yo, why are they shooting rockets at us actually? Like, and then you realize, oh, it's because we shoot fuck tons of rockets at them and we murder them all the time. Holy fucking shit. This is really bad.
I could say that. I really wish I could say that.
Right.
I wish I could say that so fucking bad. But no. Growing up here, you do not question for a moment, for so many people, the legitimacy of the Zionist entity.
Right.
If you grow up in a liberal enough place, you can question a lot of things. You can be like, if you learn that, the IDF is what legally is Palestine according to the entire rest of the world, you can be like, what the fuck are they doing there? Get out, leave. You can question that. Maybe, like, yeah, sure, most people will find that acceptable. But anything more than the two-state solution, we are allowed to exist and they are allowed to exist, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just so blindly out of consciousness. Yeah. It's not seen as an option. The idea that Zionism itself is the problem and there's no such thing as an ethical Zionist state is not something that you are allowed to say, or something that will cross almost anyone's mind?
Well, I think it's probably very similar to like in America, this country is founded on slavery. It's founded on settler colonialism, right? Its very existence is necessarily violent, right?
Yeah.
And it's never stopped being that. Yet I live in America and nobody is ever questioning if America should exist. It's always America should exist, obviously. Now, how do we tweak the little details so I feel more comfortable in it? But it's never questioned whether or not this entity should be fully and utterly abolished. So I would imagine since Israel seems to be in many ways very similar to America and by design to be so, right? It's probably similar in that regard, right?
Yeah, it is absolutely very, very similar in that. And I will also add another thing. In America, it's incorrect to call it America. America is a whole fucking 2 continents. In the USA, it is constantly at war. Constantly. And with the exception of like the Revolutionary, the Civil War, and World War II, it's never a war that concerns them. It's never anyone actually threatening the US and the US having to defend itself. It's always the US goes to a place and does the imperialism and fucks everything up and leaves with the gains of imperialism with their oil and everything. And from what I know, in the US, it is not considered acceptable to say that is bad because you're killing citizens who have nothing to do with it. It might be acceptable to say that's bad because the poor soldiers getting PTSD or whatever. But it's not considered acceptable to say that's bad because actually you shouldn't be invading foreign countries. And that's exactly the same in Israel. In Israel, it's considered, you're still called a leftist piece of shit traitor if you say, oh, it's bad because we shouldn't be sending 18-year-olds to kill for their country. Like, you're allowed to say that, but you really aren't allowed to say it's bad because we shouldn't be killing people for the crime of daring to be Palestinian on Palestinian land.
Like they erase that from the conversation so much that it's just impossible to even, I guess.
Has it been hard to carve out a group of friends that can relate to you on this in Israel?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I remember like for years, like when I was younger, like I would have arguments again and again with my friends, like circular arguments, trying to convince them that what's going on is wrong. And like I'd explain things and I'd point out facts, and then like I talk to get them again like a day later, and like it's like everything that happened in that argument was erased. Like the status quo of Zionism as inherently good and pure is far stronger than anything I could say to change it. But I mean, it really didn't have to be that. Like, when I went and I met new people, and obviously Mesarvot was a lot of people my age, and also like despite that all, like there are people who I met whose minds changed and we changed each other's mind. I mean, I didn't come out of the womb as a perfect anti-Zionist. Like obviously I, just like everyone else, was raised in a society that said Zionism good, and I had friends around me that just as much helped me learn that it was bad as I helped them learn it was bad. So yeah, nowadays, me and friends built as a project a group of like radical youth, like specifically under 18, and it's like it's a project that like maybe doesn't seem that big like from the outside, but like for me it was like extremely important.
Yeah just for like, I'm sure like your mental health, having to feel like I'm experiencing like not the extent of that you're experiencing, but like I have my own version of this that I'm experiencing right now, where I moved to a new part of the USA, and I don't really have anyone in this area that I can relate to. I'm living amongst a bunch of cops, so it's very uncomfortable.
God.
Like, yeah, no, it's US cops like neighborhood, and the whole thing is just, it's very uncomfortable for me as a communist who is for the abolition of all this, so I think for your own mental health, your own sense of identity, having people that, and when you're living in a fascist state, having that little sliver of something that you can like feel like you actually aren't completely and utterly alone, because that loneliness can completely degrade it degrades so much. Like it degrades sometimes your own confidence in your values. And when your values are, and I'm going to dare say correct, right? It starts to really mess you up. Right. And I can only imagine, I don't know. I'm really impressed of what you're doing. I think it's awesome. And not only just the action that we were discussing before, but just being Israeli, living in Israel, being for the liberation of Palestinians and the abolition of Israel, if I could dare say, be so bold to say that, right? It would be, yeah. Which, by the way, when I say abolish Israel, I get tons of criticism and tons of harassment living in America. I can't even imagine what it's like for you. And so carving out that group, it's got to be so, it's really important, but I also can only imagine how difficult it is given the extremely oppressive like climates and like the types of discourse that is even allowed, you know? It's just you're kind of a badass. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's very nice of you. But I will say several things. First of all, it's very important for me to say something. What happened a week ago now, about a week ago in Abigail Schrier's conference when I was like dragged out. I guess it was unique in that it was specific violence by civilians in large groups, but the exact same thing has happened to me with cops on a regular basis. That's happened to me so many times. There was one time in Jerusalem in which I pulled out a Palestinian flag and cops broke my finger. And then there was another time in Tel Aviv in which Palestinian flag and some random guy came and attacked us. And he came, these were weekly protests, and he came like 5 weeks in a row, every week to attack us. Like, I need to be clear, people somehow pay special attention to that situation, that happened a week ago. I don't know. Because I did good media, because I contacted a journalist before I went in, because I worked on the framing and because it was a large group of civilians. But do not mistake this as a rare occurrence or something that is not to be expected. It is only rare in that this is not the direct right arm of the state doing it. So that's part one. Now, part two I greatly appreciate your compliments. I must point out that I am not the main character of reality. The world did not start revolving when I decided that Zionism was bad. There were Israelis doing anti-Zionist action before I was born, and there were obviously Palestinians resisting since before my grandparents were born. I joined a movement, and I don't mind saying that maybe I worked to help build and continue building movements. For example, my work with radical youth groups, sure, I can take some amount of credit for that. Not all of it, but some of it. But my connection to people was not built by me. It was built by everyone who came before me. Sure, I felt lonely and I didn't know what to do and I was scared and I didn't know how to not enlist the IDF. But what helped me was the fact that I found groups like Mesarvot, which had existed before me and will hopefully exist after I move on to the next part of my activism in a different movement. It is not that I built all this. No single person built all this. And that's not to mention that I do feel it is sometimes a mistake, and a mistake often we anti-Zionist Israelis fall for, to act as if we as a collective are the main characters of reality, and it's really not about us. It is so deeply not about the amount of anti-Zionist Israelis. It's about Palestinian people who've obviously been working and building movements for years.
Well, that's true solidarity, isn't it? It's not you doing a thing because it's going to make you the main character. It's you doing a thing because you're showing solidarity with XYZ, you know what I mean? Whether it's trans people, whether it's Palestinian people, any kind of like oppressed, marginalized community, or just fellow working class people, regardless, in terms of like, you know, and this is like something like I very specifically remember when we spoke to Luna Oy. It was like one of the first episodes we ever did of Red Planet, or maybe it was like maybe episode 12 or something, I can't remember, but she said that like Western leftists have this like really bizarre thing where they keep talking about how it was their idea, or something was my idea, or I did this or I did that, and it's like that's just not what being a leftist is about, right? It's being a leftist is about you know, supporting others and solidarity. You know, it's not about doing things to be the hero, right? Ayala, did I say it right this time? Ayala? Yeah, Ayala. Have I missed this? I'm sorry, I got distracted a little bit earlier. Have we talked about how you actually got radicalized? Because I think that would be really interesting to hear, like, considering how, you know, you said it's like really hard to actually like get through the brainwashing of the state. Like what would be for you the moment where you went, oh my God, this is fucked?
Okay, well, several things. First of all, I think this was back in 2020. There was maybe before that, there was increasing violence in Jerusalem. There was Mivtza Shomer Chomot. I think it was the attacks of 2021 at 2020 or at 2021 at the very during COVID lockdown. It was a bit weird. In which, you know, for a moment there, like the world watched as Israel was cleansing the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, East Jerusalem, and in response, Hamas fired rockets from the Gaza Strip. And by that time, I can say that I was kind of a leftist and I was seeing the world, but it's very unconvincing when you hear other people say things about the country you live in and you don't see those things. Right? Like, you don't see those things because of apartheid. I don't see Israel oppressing Palestinians, and ergo it must not happen. And they're talking about my country, so I should know best about it, right? I don't remember. Maybe I'm mixing up some events. Maybe this is things I saw before or after. I don't exactly remember. But there was a specific turning point in which I was starting to doubt what was going on. For example, like, I was very, like, against the occupation, but I didn't really think about it, and I was scared and I didn't know what to do, and I was a kid and I had just started thinking about the IDF, because, you know, that I was at the age in which everyone was getting their first drafts to the IDF to show up for medical exams and shit, and I remember like not knowing what to do, and I went with my parents around Christmas time to Nazareth. Right, it's Christmas, it's Nazareth. It was very touristy in many ways. There was a very large Christmas tree. I must admit, I don't know if Palestinian Christians actually celebrate with Christmas trees. I don't think they do, but maybe I'm incorrect. But I was there, and I was, you know, in the big courtyard next to the big Christmas tree, and the entire place was swarming with military police. Military police, Magav, are this special unit. They're IDF soldiers, and they're technically border patrol, but in practice they're basically an enemy place with lots of Palestinians, and they're some kind of combination between cops and soldiers, which makes them like double evil, and the place was swarming with them, and this guy, you know, this Palestinian guy pulled out a Palestinian flag, and it was out for like 3 seconds, I kid you not. He was full body slammed by a pack of them to the floor. And, you know, I was standing there. I was a kid. I had no idea what to do. And I looked around me, and, like, sure, lots of people probably didn't notice. It was very quick. But nobody was reacting. You know, it was a place full of tourists, full of, you know, lots of Israelis came to see, I don't know, Christians doing Christmas or whatever. And nobody was reacting. Like, including my family with me at the time. And, like, I'm sure they just didn't notice. But, like, for me, that mental image of, like, that guy being dragged away and a woman who was with him, like, screaming after him, just, like, that night, like I got back to like the place we were staying, and like I opened like Mesarvot on my phone. Like lots of people around me didn't have that much of a radicalizing experience, like no single thing that radicalized them. But for me, like I saw that happen, and I knew that I would join the IDF over my dead body.
Based as hell. That rocks. Yeah. And yeah, that is like, it's such a, that's obviously why they do it so quick, right? They do it so quick because they don't want people going up and asking questions, right? They don't want people going up like who, like, I guess it's a really insightful experience that we're sort of like having right now with like someone who's actually Israeli and you know, talking to us about this stuff, because you know, all the time I guess I think like how to you know, regular everyday Israelis just like not see this stuff, and it is genuinely because it's like suppressed so much, like you say, and to the point where it's like, even if anyone like you say like gets a flag out and they're just straight away like bam, get that out of here, because they just don't want people asking questions in it. They don't want people being like, what's this flag all about? I thought they were like trying to murder us. And then that person's obviously going to explain to him, no, you got it all wrong. They don't want any kind of insight, any kind of education.
I would agree and I disagree. Obviously the place is a propaganda minefield. There's so much propaganda. But I will say that that's once again falling for the we are the main characters of reality plotline. Nazareth is a majority Palestinian city. It's a very important majority Palestinian city.
Yeah.
Far more than they're scared about any Israeli people seeing a Palestinian flag and getting the wrong idea about maybe, I don't know, Zionism is bad or whatever. They care about Palestinian people staying suppressed. They care about, you know, riots and protests not picking up once again, as has happened in Palestinian history. For example, the Land Day protests. They don't, at no point is suppressing Israelis or preventing Israelis from seeing information their main goal. Their main goal in that situation, as it always is, was to stop Palestinians from using their voice and talking to other Palestinians about what's going on.
Of course, yeah, I misunderstood that. I was under the impression that Nazareth was like not, I guess, as, you know, sort of like heavy Palestinian not occupied, what's the word? Not a majority Palestinian area. But yeah, no, totally, that completely makes sense.
Yeah. Nazareth specifically, it's important. Obviously, there's not Jewish. I mean, it's a Christian town, and there aren't Jewish Christians, so it's
of course,
and like a few monasteries. There's a lot of monasteries there. Yeah.
That is, and so like then you went straight on to Mesar. Oh, I'm gonna say this wrong. I'm so sorry.
It's fine. Don't worry.
Mesarvot. You went straight onto the website there, and then, or was it like Twitter, or like did you reach out to someone, or like what was like the next steps from there?
Oh, well, okay, this is going to sound embarrassing. The first thing I had to do at the time, Mesarvot has changed now. Everyone be happy. We have the youth have inflicted change on the network. It used to only have a Twitter. Not a Twitter. It used to only have a Facebook. And I didn't have a Facebook because teenagers don't have Facebook these days. What are we, 80? So actually that first day, like I had found Mesarvot and like I've read a web page about it. Say hello to my cat, everyone. Her name is Mate. And so like honestly, that first night, most of what I did was wait for my phone to download Facebook.
Right, okay.
But yeah, then I reached out to them and they said, hey, we're having like a community organizing meeting like in a few days. It's in Tel Aviv. Why don't you come? And I did. And at the time, I expected them to like explain to me how not to join the IDF. That's not what happened. I think we were arguing about stickers. I think we still haven't finished arguing about stickers. I don't know if we ever finished printing those stickers. But yeah, it was not about that. And yet I still found a community. I found a friend of mine that I had grown kind of distant from who was there also there for the first tag, which was a really cool moment for me. And yeah, it was really cool. This is the moment in which I tell Americans in the audience, you too have orgs near your home. Join them.
Yeah, we try and talk here on Red Planet like quite a lot about friends of the show, Palestine Action. Are you aware of Palestine Action, Ayelet?
Yeah, they're the people that do that occupied the weapons factory in the UK,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, fuck up Elbit Systems. Yeah, it's really base shit. But yeah, so like I think this is a good opportunity to remind people they have a bail fund. They're currently occupying a factory in Leicester. So and I believe they're on day I think it's day 35 of the siege today. So yeah, I do think that it's just palestineaction.com. And you can get the bail fund there, but I'll oh yeah, sorry, the legal defense fund, it's literally, sorry, Palestine Action, all one word, .org/defense-fund. So yeah, if you've got a couple of quid, chuck it over to our comrades at Palestine Action, who are getting suppressed by the state of the UK for trying to stop people making weapons that kill Palestinian children. So yeah. But yeah, back to Mesarvot, Ayala. I think it's really like interesting and important to talk about the because there are definitely other organizations in Israel as well, right? That maybe they're like similar to Mesarvot, but they're not exactly the same. So I remember I'm thinking of oh god, the name, I'm gonna fuck up the pronunciation, so I'm really sorry. This is really bad as well because I have like Jewish siblings and like my stepdad's Jewish. Like I know how to pronounce some Hebrew stuff, but like is it B'Tselem?
B'Tselem.
B'Tselem, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So you know about B'Tselem?
Yeah, well, B'Tselem are something different. They are a journalist agency. Like they run stores. They talk about the occupation. They do journalism, hugely important. They do a lot of really important reporting. They're not an activist group technically. Like, I mean, they're a journalist group that obviously is hugely important for activism. We need to know information in order to protest it. But they themselves do not show up to protest as activism. But if you want like examples of some other activist groups within, first of all, I can only speak to groups that are either Jewish Israeli groups or groups that operate within 1948 Israel. I don't know about Palestinian-led Palestinian groups in the West Bank. I'm sorry about that. But in the West Bank and obviously the besieged Gaza Strip. But so, for example, we have, for other people looking not to enlist, Profil 21, that is Profile 21 in English. Their work is mainly one-on-one work, also with not enlisting to the IDF. They're less straightforwardly political and more strictly like actually the meat of not enlisting to the IDF. They have lawyers on hand and they can give you advice and all kinds of stuff. If you're looking not for activism, but just how to get out, you might want to check them out. In addition, there's, the infamous, they kind of have a chokehold on everything. Mistaklim Lakibush B'Einayim, in English, that would be looking the occupation in the eyes. They are a group that specifically protests the 67 occupation. They operate within 1948 Israel and in the West Bank. They're hugely cool. They do a lot of good work. They don't really speak about other anti-Zionism stuff like the Nakba, but yeah, they focus a lot on the ongoing occupation. There's some other groups. Shovrim Shtika is an advocacy group and a protest group. It means breaking silence. It's a group of ex-IDF soldiers, like people who went to the IDF and are now spilling the beans on the terrible things they did as part of the IDF. Wow. It's obviously hugely important. It's important to remind everyone that, like, yeah, let's be honest, most people aren't going to see through the lies of their society at the age of 18 or 17 and a half. That's just not going to happen. Most people who are leftists in Israel joined the IDF and then later regretted it. Like, that's unfortunately the case. Teenagers aren't known for great abilities of introspection on society. And like, yeah, I don't like that too much, but it's the truth. And groups like Shovlim Shtika do a lot of very, very important work. There's also some other smaller groups, and like Shalom Achshav, which are a peace movement. A lot of groups focus specifically on the occupation. There's, in addition, a group I'm closely tied with it. This is not a advocacy group. It's a bona fide political party. There are two of them. Hadash. It's the Israeli Communist Party. It is a joint Palestinian Jewish party that seeks, liberation both for the working class and for Palestinian people. Their official stance, that is like the stance they have for their opinion on Zionism, is that they want a Palestinian country and a Medinat Kol Ezrachah. What does that mean? A country for all its citizens. They want, like, between the river and the sea, officially, they want a country that is a Palestinian country and another country in 48 Israel's borders that's like called Israel, but it's not a Jewish country. It's a country with no systemic racist laws. So it is important to point out that in Israel, it is illegal to run if you deny the existence of the Jewish state. Like, if you want to oppose that, you can't run for parliament. So, yeah, make of that what you will. The other group is Balad, who are specifically a Palestinian group that seeks that advocates for an end to the occupation and the Nakba, which was the mass deportation of Palestinian people in 1948. Hadash also deals with it, and it is specific. Like, it's not a communist party, unlike Hadash.
Cool. And yeah, I think that's like a really interesting thing that's like evolved from this. It's like, yeah. I just think it's like so interesting, like learning about the different sort of organizations, like political parties and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I was just looking through the like the election results. Like they have like 4 out of the 120 seats or something like that in the parliament, which is unfortunate, but it's something, right? It's something.
Well, it's important to say two important things. There's another group which are very classificationally tricky. They're called Meretz. They are a Jewish group with almost only Jewish members that sometimes oppose the occupation and sometimes don't, depending on what's more politically useful.
Okay.
One could not call them true allies, but they're often important.
Yeah.
And this year they're complicated. That as liberals are often are, they are very complicated. And
true.
And this year, these elections, did they not pass the Markov barrier? They didn't get enough votes to sit in parliament, but generally they also get around 4 seats.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, super interesting, super interesting. And so what I guess what I'm really interested in about Mesarvot in general is, like, with them being like focused on the IDF and sort of like helping people, I guess, resist conscription and stuff like that. What are the kind of actions have Mesarvot been like, doing at the minute? Like, what's like the big sort of drive at the minute? And what other kind of like successful stuff have you been doing in the past?
Currently, there are 2 conscientious objectors in prison from Mesarvot. One of them is Yuval Dag, who has currently spent he's been 3 rounds in prison, and the other is one who has requested to remain anonymous under the moniker of Dalet, which is the letter D in the Hebrew alphabet. They're both currently in prison with another one, Sophie, going to enter August. Most of our actions surround conscientious objectors in prison, because it's the most obvious way one can refuse to join the IDF, even though, of course, there are other ways. It surrounds uplifting them so they can use their voices. It surrounds rights for, people who want to refuse to join the IDF for it to be possible to do so. And obviously it surrounds being there for support, showing up to supports outside prisons, showing up to protest with them, explaining we don't need to do this. We don't need to join the IDF.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think solidarity with prisoners can be such a powerful thing. Like, we spoke to prison abolitionist organization in the UK, and that just letting prisoners know that you're there and there are people on the outside who are supporting them and stuff like that is so massive. And how does that work with Mesarvot? Is that do you send letters? Are the letters interfered with by any way, or are you allowed you're sort of laughing there, so I'm assuming that's the case?
Well, there's no strict, rigid rules. It's several things to point out. As opposed to prison abolition, anywhere basically, it's important to remember that conscientious objectors have a special status for them because they explicitly choose to be in jail.
Of course.
Right, so it is different, their experience than I don't know, a Palestinian person taken into administrative detention without knowing when they're going to trial, and stuff like that. But yes, so we are allowed to send letters. We do send letters. We also do mass letter writing campaigns and get people to send the letters and stuff. They are checked sometimes. I think they're also always allowed through. There's generally weird rules about who is allowed what. There were a few years in which prisoners weren't allowed pens, and then we did a big ruckus about it and turned to some of the bigger newspaper agencies, and they ran the stories about newspaper prisoners aren't allowed pens, and then they were allowed pens. Or there was one time where there were banned books. They keep trying to ban books. They keep being no, you can't bring Das Kapital into prison. And then we do the same thing where we run to the media, media that finds it interesting. They're here are the books that you're not allowed to read in military prison. And then they're fine, we'll let you read the book. It's all kind of things where there's no inherent blanket bans, but they keep trying to pull shit.
I'm with you. Yeah, and that kind of goes sort of hand in hand with the way that a lot of people in the prison system, just all over the world, any kind of prison is a tool of the state, right? And they're desperately trying to stop prisoners from being radicalized, as if the very I guess experience of being imprisoned by the state isn't radicalizing enough, and they tell people when they get out of prison, don't you dare start talking with leftist organizers, don't you dare do it. And that, so that kind of goes hand in hand, and to be expected, I guess.
A very important example of this is okay, obviously if you're in military prison, all the people there with you are people experiencing violence from the military. That's inherent to being in military prison, right? And so on one hand, you might think oh, this is very fertile ground to make people leftists. And from what I've heard, in many ways it is. But there's also been intense combating. Several refusers I've talked to have said that they're not allowed to talk about politics. They're forbidden from talking about politics, including with their cellmates and stuff. And also I've also heard, and I fully believe it, considering who I know, propaganda apparently runs extremely strong. Apparently it's very common to be sitting in military prison next to people that have gone to prison for smoking during watch, and they'll be no, how dare you, you're a traitor, fucking Arab whore, or whatever. That's a pretty common insult against leftist women. So yeah, it's whack.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds rubbish. Yeah, I think when it comes to making sure that people understand, I guess a lot of Mesarvot Mesarvot's work is like making sure that people understand like what the IDF do, like what kind of education can you sort of, I guess, get away with, because you know, we all know as pro-Palestinian activists, as supporters of Palestinian people, that the IDF literally just murder children. They literally just fucking shoot kids who are, you know, it's every kind of fucked up. And like, what kind of I guess that's my sort of question. Like, is there a way that you could like actively be like, because I guess you've got that buffer, like you said earlier, where you can't really tell someone who's in their country where they've lived their whole life and they have all this propaganda and stuff like that. You can't really just tell them like, you know, the IDF just like kills children, right? Because they'll turn around and be like, oh, well, Hamas makes children soldiers, right? And they'll say shit like that, right? How do you get around that kind of stuff? Or is that not really conversations that Mesarvot does?
Okay, there are two things. First of all, important for Mesarvot to point out, like always, it is illegal to tell people not to enlist. As in, fully, completely illegal to call for people to refuse to serve the IDF. I think that more than that, it's specifically is under the category of treason, and you can get like, apparently, if it's actually enforced, a crazy amount of years in prison for it. We have a lawyer who works with Mesarvot. She also works in Hadash. She makes sure every time we write like a media post or a speech or anything, that every place where we might theoretically say something like you should refuse, which we would obviously never ever say, we must say we beg of you to consider what you really want, or we want you to think about what the idea, like, you know, ways in which one could theoretically say you should refuse. Not that we'd ever tell anyone to refuse. We don't do that. So that's one thing. So obviously, Mesarvot is obviously handicapped, and like, yeah, we can't tell people to refuse, and we don't do that. But more than that, oftentimes, you know, radicalization is complicated. Like, we try to do it. We try to work with different advocacy networks. There's a group that isn't an advocacy network, but is an important group called Zuhot, meaning we remember in Hebrew, which does that speaks and teaches on the Nakba of 48, which is even less talked about in Israeli society than the occupation. Whereas it's acceptable to some degree to mention the occupation and it being bad, the mass deportation of Palestinian people during 48 is seriously not allowed to talk about, even within leftist groups. I believe that this is because that the moment you realize this, you realize that there's no inherent legitimacy for a Zionist state. If it's built on the mass deportation of Palestinian people, then there's no ethical way for it to exist. So we do, you know, we do work with them. We do work with groups like, you know, or like share things with groups like Shovlim Shtika, which, you know, are, as said before, are people who were Israeli soldiers who spoke up about what they did. We obviously do stuff with Misaklim Lakibush Banan. It's all complicated. We try our best to talk and convince people, but ultimately, the best work we can do, I believe, is reminding people that there's a choice. People can maybe, from seeing our stuff, and honestly, more likely, like seeing our stuff slowly and then choosing to learn more, because we can't change anyone for them. We can only help people along the way. People can only change their minds if they want to. But our best work is reminding people that they have a choice. They don't need to enlist. They can, as they learn more about the IDF and its crimes, choose not to participate.
For sure, yeah. And I guess, yeah, so that's another really interesting part of it, because then you have and I'm so sorry, I've absolutely no idea how to pronounce the organization, but the guys who are in the IDF and regret it, and they talk about their experience and stuff like that, must be like a really hard thing for them to kind of get around, because how do they deal with the semantics of I witnessed the horrors of the IDF, I witnessed the horrors of the state of Israel and Zionist genocide against Palestinians? Like, how, you know, how do they word that? Is that like a thing that they can get arrested for like, is that treason? Is that the same thing?
It's important to point out that nobody acts like it's a scaremongering law. They can't actually enforce it. What are they
Of
going to look
course.
at every single one of our posts and audio clips? And it's a law meant to make us scared and unable to speak our minds, even if they can never actually enforce it. But generally speaking, you're allowed to say, like, if, especially Showimsika, you can say, I did XYZ bad things. I threw a tear gas canister at someone's head because that's what my commanding officers told me to do. I tied this guy up for like 2 days. Like, I don't know if that wouldn't happen. But the
We
point
can assume
here,
it probably did.
yeah, the point here is you are allowed, to say exactly what you specifically did. And if we're being completely honest, like in popular Israeli consciousness, the IDF soldiers who speak up, obviously they're not treated well. Like, they're called traitors and all kinds of other very, very bad things. But because in Israel, the idea of having been in the IDF is so important, they are considered in some ways more respectable than other organizations, because they can say, oh, I've been in the IDF, I served our country, and I can say that it's bad, which is something lots of Zionist Israelis will respect more than someone who says, no, I haven't been in the IDF, and that's good, actually. Israelis really don't like it when people don't join the IDF. They're so worked up about it all the time. And obviously, Mesarvot, as always, aren't the main group they attack, because once again, we are not the main characters of reality. For example, in Zionist society, one of the major hated groups because of this are Orthodox Jewish people who don't enlist the IDF for religious reasons, basically. A lot of they go to learn yeshivot, and for some of them, it's a belief that, a belief that, like, learning in a yeshiva is what will protect Israel. And for some of them, it's more like, it's not our place to intervene, it's God's will. And some of them, like, there are also anti-Zionist ultra-Orthodox groups that operate within a religious framework for why that's not the case. All kinds of reasons. And liberal Zionists hate their guts for refusing to enlist. They are so pissed about it. These are a group that within the law, they have an agreement called Esquema Status Quo, in which they are allowed not to enlist. And I cannot explain how much Zionists are frothing at the mouth about it. Actually, I can't explain. Pre-Holocaust Nazi Germany imagery about Jews with, like, massive noses and how they're rats and how they're destroying humankind and how they're a demographic menace. That's how liberal Zionists talk about ultra-Orthodox Jews. They're like, because these people are poor and on welfare and sometimes one of the parents doesn't work, and the fact that they have lots of children, then this is a huge menace and we cannot deal with this, and this is the biggest problem in our country. It is balls to the walls insane.
That is so fucked.
Oh,
so
Lord.
extremely fucked. Yeah. And I guess, like, there are probably so many conflicting conversations that you might have with, I don't know, people in sort of that camp, and how they talk about Palestinians as well. And it's just always been like such a, like, it's just always been such, like, a very, like, I don't know, like, an obvious thing to me that it's like, oh my gosh, like, Jewish people have been, absolutely persecuted, genocided, all over the world. And it's like, just to hear, like, that same rhetoric, like, coming through again and again. I'm reading a good book at the minute called Conflict Is Not Abuse by Sarah Schulman, and she's a reformed Zionist. She's a Jewish lesbian woman, and she basically talks, like, a little bit about how, like, sometimes oppressed people can, like, end up siding with genocidal rhetoric when they're given, like, a bit of power. I've not got to that bit yet, so I don't want to talk about it too much, because obviously I don't know about it. But it's like that whole, like, fact that you hear those same things that people were saying about Jewish people, like you say, pre-Holocaust, like, and you hear Israeli people say that about Palestinians, and now I'm learning they say it about other Israeli people who are just like, you know, it's just so fucked, so extremely fucked. But anyway,
Yeah,
sorry, I missed a bit there because I had to go to the toilet, so I'm sorry if I barged in on anything.
there's something I want to add here, which I feel like is very important. There's lots of ideas that honestly are basically only on Twitter. I believe that they don't exist in real life, but there's ideas often of just because someone is oppressed, they are inherently correct or right or know the best thing to do or anything like that. And like, I need to make it extremely clear, yeah, Israelis are oppressed. And you know what? Like, in a lot of ways, sure, is like Israel did help Jewish people. I mean, I have two of my great grandparents that I got to meet in my life. The others of my family died before I was born. One of them, whose parents immigrated to Israel in the 1920s, they were part of the second Aliyah. They did their thing. They were, you know, exporting genocidal Zionism or whatever. But you know what didn't happen to my great grandmother? She didn't live through the fucking Holocaust. Then my other great grandmother, who I got to meet, who is now no longer with us, she came to Israel after World War II, and she did experience the Holocaust, and it was bad for her. I think it's bad she experienced that, and I think it's like good that she survived it, I guess, but obviously many others didn't. It's the kind of thing where like I have trouble blaming my great grandparents for what they did. Like, I'm glad they didn't live through the Holocaust. I think that's good. But why did they have to be ethnostatic about it? What I mean to say here is that there's nothing wrong. I mean, in my opinion, which obviously I cannot speak for all people in all the world, but in my opinion, there's absolutely nothing morally wrong with the concept of a Jewish person living here. There's not even anything wrong with building a Jewish presence. The only issue is that Zionism, as a country that is inherently unequal for Jewish and non-Jewish people, cannot exist ethically in a place where other people obviously exist.
Right.
You can't march up to a group of people, say, I'm building a country that's unequal to you, and they'll build that country and like be ethical. That's not something possible. And that's the inherent flaw of Zionism. And that flaw is what brought the Nakba and the occupation and the ethnic cleansing of the Golan Heights and the siege on Gaza. It's all based on that inherent flaw in which Zionism states that, you know, it states that there's a state that there in which, you know, Jewish people have rights that others do not, and upon which it will build obviously every other act of genocide.
Yeah, I think that's such a like important analysis, and I think that's really, it's really, you know, good to hear that you like have that understanding, because again, it's like, you know, and my knowledge here may be a little paraphrased, it might not be entirely accurate, but like the thing that really fucked with me personally in learning about like the establishment of the state of Israel and the Nakba and all this stuff is it was essentially you know, galvanized by the fact that the British were occupying Palestine. You know, that it was a colony, right? It was like part of the British Empire. And it was just kind of like, right, okay, you know, let's basically like, you know, create the state. And I think I don't know the ins and outs of it. I know that there were like some Zionist groups that were influencing like you know, British and Americans to do this, but also like there was like talk of, and this may be wrong, but like Palestinians who, upon hearing of the idea of Jewish people coming there after, you know, World War II, being like, yeah, they could come and live here, it's fine. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, of course, like why would anyone reject, why would any like, you know, nation reject refugees of genocide and war and shit like that?
First of all, it's important to point out that many nations did In fact, many nations is. I mean, the U.S. famously turned away a boat of refugees from Germany, because they didn't want them. Like, to be clear, many people did, but that's, I'm sorry, but not an accurate understanding of history.
Right, gotcha. Yeah.
But while it's nice to think of Zionism as directly Holocaust based, or like happening right after, and obviously the Jewish state was established in 1948 after there was, of course, an influx of immigrants immediately after the Holocaust. That is not correct to say that it began there. There have been waves of Zionist movements since far before that, with for example, the second Aliyah that I mentioned earlier. Aliyah is the phrase used of people coming to Israel, which had already established Jewish Zionist communities, to which there was already opposition, and rightfully so, because these communities, even before they used physical violence, did use economic violence, because often these people were European and they had far greater buying power than, you know, the Palestinian people living here under British colonial rule. As a result, they could purchase this land, which wasn't even owned by Palestinian people. They were owned by landlords who weren't Palestinians. I think they were Turkish, because this was back in the Ottoman Empire, because this was still Ottoman Palestine. But Yali, who's watching this, will correct me on this if I'm wrong, because she has weird opinions on Turkey. My point here is that Palestinian resistance to Zionism, and Zionism itself, had already started at least in 1936, back when there was a series of riots and a very, very impressive workers' strike, in which the Jaffa port, which was very influential, was shut down for a great many years. Then Zionists swooped in and were strike builders. That's what allowed the Tel Aviv port to be built, because they were being terrible strike breakers.
Right.
So again, it is inaccurate to say that this began in 1948. It's been going on before it. That being said, obviously, I am certain that many Palestinian people did in fact look at the Holocaust and say, despite that all, we'd probably be willing to take Jewish refugees. I mean, the Holocaust was harsh.
Right. Yeah, for sure. No, well, I appreciate the education. Yeah, just confirming that, because it's like, yeah, excuse me, you can very easily like fall into the trap of being like, oh, well, you know, it was Israel was created because of the Holocaust kind of thing. That's why it exists. It's a safe place for Jewish people to go and live, etc., etc. So yeah, I appreciate that.
I mean, Israel as a whole is always complicated when it comes to that. People who came to Israel before that were fleeing oppression. I mean, the centers of oppression in Europe before the Holocaust. They were fleeing pogroms and shit. And yeah, they were tired of living under oppression, and they decided to do that by oppressing other people. Another very important thing to point out, this is hugely important and it's not talked about. There's an idea of Jewish Israelis being white and all coming from European countries. And obviously there's validity in this idea, especially since during the earlier emergences of Zionism, there was a specific idea of justifying it by claiming to be colonialists. And they are colonialists, to be clear. But we are forgetting something here. Only half of current Israeli Jews are white, or white according to international American standards or whatever, because the other half are Middle Eastern, which is to say Jews from Iraq, Iran, Taiman, Yarden, you know, all of the surrounding countries that had Jewish populations. And it's important to point out that that at a certain point, right among the emergence of the Jewish state around 1948, there was a mass deportation of Jewish people from all these countries. They were kicked out in what is an extremely important example in ways in which anti-Zionism can sometimes be anti-Semitism, because these Jewish people were kicked out because people decided they were spies for the Zionist entity based on nothing but their Judaism. It is important to remember, as much as we talk about it, that yes, it is possible to be anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist at the same time, and it can have disastrous implications, because these people who were kicked out of their countries, obviously colonized countries by other places, oftentimes didn't have anywhere to go. Some of them might have been able to get French or British citizenship from where they live, but not all of them, and they didn't speak the right languages or trust these countries to accept them. As a result, a lot of these same people who were kicked out because of so-called allegiances to Zionism had nowhere to go but the Zionist entity. As a result, these are a group of people that, were just normal people who had no specific reason to support Zionism, suddenly basically being forced into doing it. And they now obviously exist in Israel and are Zionist as anyone else in Israel. Here, what's important to me here to point out is that several things. First of all, to explain that sometimes anti-Semitism disguised as anti-Zionism can be extremely dangerous, as happened in history. But also very importantly, to deny Western narratives of what's happening here, in that it must be exactly the same as happening there. What's happening here must be white Jews oppressing brown Palestinians, because that's what's happening there, despite the fact that while obviously, yes, Zionism is based within white supremacy and is based within a colonialist framework, it does simply not operate in the exact same way on the exact same grounds. And to claim that it does is simply a failure of analysis and looking at reality.
That's a really important point. Yeah, because and this is something as well that like you will get when I mean, this is something that I've done, like I'll post about something to do with Palestine, and you'll get all kinds of, arguments as to why that's a bad thing to do and stuff like that. And one of the things that I've seen a lot of the time is like, well, what about all the anti-Semitism from all the Middle Eastern states, from all the Arab states? And it's like, yes, that's really bad, right? It's obvious that that's bad. Like, that shouldn't happen. Like, I don't know why this is a question. Like, do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, what are they trying to say?
Yeah, people keep saying, Israelis keep responding to like talking about the Nakba by like, what about what happened to all the Middle Eastern Jews? That was exactly the same. And yes, that's the fucking point.
Right, exactly. Yeah, doing that is bad, but also doing it again in a slightly different way against Palestinians is like, it's still bad. It's just such a bizarre argument. I've never understood it. Like, but that is something that they'll say, right? They'll quote that piece of information, pro-Zionist people, and all stuff like that. And it's just like, yeah, well, just because it was wrong there doesn't mean that it's right in this sense. And yeah, you would think that that's a very obvious talking point, but it's not.
I kind of wonder if Ayelet, if you could expand a little bit more on what you were just talking about, the way that white supremacy doesn't exactly apply in Israel. If you had more, I don't know if there's anything more you could say about that, but I'm kind of fascinated because I don't live in Israel. Okay.
Okay.
Like.
Sure. Okay, here's the thing. Obviously, Israel.
I mean, it does apply, but to be clear, but yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah.
When you look at early documents about Israel, especially early rough ideas on Zionism, like Herzl proposed, is obviously white supremacist in nature. For example, yeah. Herzl was the guy who's credited with like thinking up Zionism, first proposed a version in which this Zionist state would literally be a German colony. That is obviously white supremacism, meet when colonialism, right? But it's also important to point out in several ways that, for example, as much as it's a useful talking point, it is inaccurate to say that 1948 Israel, for example, is settler colonialism. Now, wait a minute before you all murder me. That is not to say that it is not as bad as settler colonialism. Different things can be different and still equally as bad, but Israel did not operate as a base point for any other country. They weren't there to be Britain in between the river and the sea. They weren't Germany between the river and the sea. They weren't anyone. They were an invading force of people from many countries between the river and the sea. It is, while it's fully correct to claim, for example, settlements in the West Bank is settler colonialism, because here we have continuation from one country into another in the name of this country. Israel itself is not from any country. It is not exactly settler colonialism, and it doesn't need to be to still be bad. Right? Similarly, arguments about white supremacy. No one in Israel is acceptable via white supremacy. This is obvious. They are Jewish people, like Ashkenazi, like they could be European Jewish people, but still Jewish, which is obviously not white enough for white supremacists. They could be Middle Eastern Jewish, which is double bad. They could obviously be Palestinians, which, they're not white. And obviously there's a presence and amount of Ethiopian Jews in Israel, none of who are acceptable via white supremacy. But obviously you don't need to be perfectly white in order to uphold standards of white supremacy. Even if all Jewish thinkers and workers in Israel are only inspired by white supremacy or doing white supremacy-esque things, it is still important to point out ways in which they can be different and still bad.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good explanation. I think we often see Israel as settler colonialism because it's supported so much by settler colonialist imperialist powers, right? Do you know what I mean? It's supported by the UK, it's supported by Europe, it's supported by the US. So yeah, I fully understand that analysis of it for sure. Absolutely. We've got some very interesting questions, and I'm not like there's definitely room for more. 100%. I don't think these questions are gonna be too hard to answer, but also they might be a bit long. It's fine if they're a bit long. We've got half an hour. It's not a problem. But yeah, I don't know if we do. Should we start doing questions now, Kira?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I guess the first question is from the YouTube chat. From Worldmark Wyndham. Let's see. They were wondering about ways to support Palestinian and trans people in Israel.
In Israel or in Palestine? These are two different questions. Like
I think are you reading the same question I am, Mule?
Yeah. I think whatever best answer you think is for this question, which is not a good question. So like, I guess what this person is trying to ask is, what's the best way to support trans people in Palestine and in Israel? Or, well, I mean, it looks like yeah, no, it's a difficult question.
Whatever way you want to answer the question.
Well,
whatever you think is a good interpretation of that question and the answer to that.
Okay, I can give both these answers because one of them is short in Spark Notes. If there's a trans person who is in 1948 Israel, they are legally an Israeli citizen. Thus, they are not subject to the same blatant apartheid system as exists within Gaza and the occupied territories. And generally, it's basically the same as for a Jewish trans person. It's important to point out that due to basically a universal tendency within colonized groups to see LGBT identity as a Western import and thus opposed, that Palestinian society does tend to be more homophobic and transphobic than the more westernized Israeli Jewish society, and thus this person may need more support as, a person that comes from an unaccepting family or group. But the same structures necessary to assist them are the same structures necessary to assist Jewish Israelis. Things like access to HRT, access, specifically for trans people, access to HRT, access to surgery, education on the topic, that kind of stuff. In the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, it is more complicated because it banks on the exact same thing. The Israeli informational centers, the Shabak, extort and blackmail LGBT Palestinian people in order to make them mashtabim, cooperators, people who will snitch on their neighbors who may or may not be doing any kind of opposition in order to make sure they don't reveal their identity. This is, of course, extremely complicated because, unfortunately, both in parts of the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, if you're discovered to be gay, you could be killed. That is the nature of a society that sees LGBT identity as a Western import along with as part of colonialism. As thus, the best way to help these kinds of people is obviously to donate to them to specifically. If you see GoFundMes and stuff for stuff like them leaving, lots of Palestinian people obviously don't want to leave Palestine. It's their ancestral homeland, and the whole goal of the Zionist occupation is to get them to leave. But for LGBT people, oftentimes the safest thing they can do is leave. So it's important to allow people, to assist people in doing that. And of course, people like that are the people that would be most helped by the liberation of Palestine, as they are held both under the shackles of Israel's occupation and under the shackles of the society around them falling for reactionaryism as a way to oppose colonialism. And in those states, because obviously, as with all Palestinian people, the best way to help is to try and work for the end of the occupation.
I think that's a super based answer. Thank you very much. And we've got another from World Mount Wyndham. Less of a question and more of a check-in. Have you been okay after being physically dragged and then singled out on Twitter? Physically and online dragged. How is it going, basically?
Well, again, as said, I am unfortunately used to it. Cops be violent. Fellow protesters who are Zionists be violent. My friends attended Jerusalem Pride this Thursday, and you know what they got? Violence from cops, because they were being leftists and holding a Palestinian flag or standing so near someone who held the Palestinian flag. It's important to remember that while what I was done was more televised or seen, does not make it different from the norm. And thus, I feel like on the physically dragged part, I am doing great. I knew exactly what would happen to me, and that's exactly what happened, and I was fully okay with it. And I'm just kind of the kind of person that stuff can happen to me and it doesn't faze me. I will say this might sound weird, but immediately afterward, I got bombarded by a lot of groups from the Israeli news and stuff asking me questions. That was so stressful. The news are the worst organization in the world. No, I'm kidding. The news as a group have a tendency of not seeing the people they interview as people, but instead as possible stories. They do not respect your boundaries. Do they not respect you for what you actually want to say, but only what you can do for them? The worst thing that happened after the event was the bombardment I got from the different news stories that finally decided they care about what I say as long as I'm not talking about Palestinian people. And they did lots of bullshit. And then half of them cut the interviews I did because I talked too much about Palestinian people. The Twitter thing, it's the kind of thing that can really get you. But fortunately, I can say I do lots and lots of activism in real life. I know lots of people in real life. I no longer need the validation or unvalidation of random weirdos on Twitter. Twitter for me, I look at it and realize, wait, that's not fucking real. These 500 TERFs that found me, they are literally on halfway across the world. They're not real. I don't know them in real life. The response from people I know in my real life has been overwhelmingly positive, and that's what matters. It's not what some random person in the UK who is being weird thinks about me.
Yeah, and also 200 of those accounts, 200 of those 500 accounts are probably just the same person. Yeah. I vibe with that 100%. Fuck being online. Being
Mhm.
online sucks. It's the worst thing ever. Yeah, touch grass. It's so much better. Do you want to read the next one, sweet Kara?
From Lunan Moon. The Israeli contestant in Eurovision was praised by the hosts on my country's national television for joining the IDF as a woman on the basis of progressiveness as women in the army. How would I begin to point out to my less woke family and friends why that isn't at all a good thing? What would be a good starting point to explain why Zionism is bad?
Well, I would start by saying that it's not really needed to base on that. Okay, hang on. I will start by saying the reason it is weird to applaud Ayelet for joining the IDF as a woman is that all women in Israel, or almost all of them, joined the IDF. Like, it's important to point out how much of a cultural institution in Israel the IDF is, to the point where not joining it is considered really weird, and as weird as not going to high school. So that's part one. It's not really progressive for if she was forced to do it by law and also everyone be doing it. The other thing, though, is I think basic acknowledgement of Israeli war crimes. You know, people who aren't Israeli don't have the same weird propaganda thing. If you talk to them, if you tell them Muhammad Tamimi was killed 4 days ago by Israeli soldiers and he was literally 2.5 years old, that's kind of helpful on its own. You don't really need to have more of an argument, except for killing children is really bad.
Yeah, like that I would argue that's like you can't get easier than that. Like, you know, not even remotely capable of being a child soldier, not even remotely capable, like, so you don't even have to like defend from that argument, like an actual baby, like an actual small 2-year-old baby. And this isn't even like the first time that this has happened. You know, and I think one of the biggest, like, most eye-opening things that I learned about what Israel does to Palestinians is like the actual removal of the ability to have clean water and non-contaminated food, and the fact that they like constantly test gas weaponry on their you know, crops and stuff like that, and just like the prison labor and all this kind of stuff of like specifically like Palestinians, etc. Like, you know, it's just quite, so there's so much that you could choose from. It's like it's so wide. You know, whenever anyone comes back to you with these arguments that say like, oh, it's a complicated issue, it's not a complicated issue. Like, it really isn't. You can't just, I guess, like, the thing that I would say to you is that you can't just sit there and let someone tell you that it's a complicated issue when you know in your heart of hearts that it's like definitely not, right? Because everybody knows, everybody who sees it and everybody who understands, like, you know, the genocide of Palestinians will know, like, this isn't that complex. This isn't that complex. Like, actually, it's just really, really fucking bad, and it just needs to stop, and that's the end of it. Like, you know, any kind of like people who will say to you, oh, well, you know, Hamas are always like, you know, killing people and they're always shooting people, and it's like, yeah, that's what happens in war, that's what happens in genocide. Like, what do you think is going to happen? You think there's not going to be any resistance to stuff like this? Like, Palestinians are just going to be like, okay, yeah, fine, you know?
I mean, it's not complicated, but it's easy to make it seem complicated when it's easier to identify with one side. Because,
right.
okay, Hamas, let's be honest, probably shouldn't be shooting missiles at civilians. I don't like it when missiles are shot at me. I mean, I've, you know, lived in a place, as all Israelis do, where like they're regularly like missile alerts, and we go down to the bunkers, and I don't like that. I prefer missiles not be shot at people. Shocking. Or like, you know, a while back during the Intifadas, there was like lots of people that would go on random buses and blow themselves up and all the people on the bus with them. And like, yeah, I would kind of wish that didn't happen. In that case, it is complicated in which there is no moral side. If you look at it and it's like Israel's shooting civilians and Hamas is shooting civilians, then that means these are the same. But this is a complete ignorance of material conditions. Israel is shooting civilians in order to be able to maintain the Zionist state that is inherently violent. Hamas, while it definitely shouldn't be shooting civilians, is doing so in reaction to almost a century of violence from Israel. Obviously, that doesn't justify it, but it does make it make sense. Honestly, if I was a Palestinian citizen living in the West Bank who didn't have access, and I was living in the Gaza Strip and I didn't have access to clean water, and the only Israelis I've ever met or seen were soldiers pointing guns at me, then honestly, yeah, I probably wouldn't like them too much either. And maybe I'd want to throw missiles at them too. It is complicated in that there is no right side because both sides are doing unethical actions. But to frame it as equal sides when one of them is a massive military regularly killing people to a very large degree, and the other is far smaller group, that makes it, not the same.
Yeah, exactly. We have a late coming question, and it's a little bit difficult to parse, so I'm gonna just communicate with this person in the chat, Willada, and she says, if this is not talked about as it was very late, is there any info from older people that remember it was different being passed on to younger people, or is very recent history not talked about because it could lead to bad subjects? I think that what she's trying to say is, like, I guess, are there people who are old in Israel who remember the Nakba for what it is kind of thing and are trying to pass it on to younger people? I imagine that's what she's trying to say. But
yeah, there are Palestinian people who remember the Nakba and talk about it. My great grandmother, she's Jewish, obviously, and she was there at the time. She was even part of the Palmach, which was one of the Zionist militias. And obviously she doesn't talk about it because she kind of supports it. Unfortunately, Zionists who were there at the time, at least every single one of them I've talked to, are generally for the Nakba, because they like the Jewish state, and was necessary in order to create it.
Yeah. I was thinking that it's like, you're not really gonna. Again, it's like it's trying to parse apart the brainwashing and the propaganda and everything, of recent history, even if it's as far back as the Nakba, everything from Zionists is going to be a pro-Zionist thing kind of thing, you know what I mean? And it's not going to be as simple as that, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that's the end of the questions for now, and I guess we should just finish with just thanking you for coming on. Is there anything that you want to plug before we let you go?
Yeah, I recommend everyone check out at Mesarvot. I'm biased, but I think they do fantastic work, and you can check them out on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook if you're 1 million years old. And yeah, I don't know, if you want, I guess you can follow me on Twitter, even though I'm not that interesting. I'm at Bambikubo on Twitter. And yeah, freedom and equality from the river to the sea. I don't have much else to add. Oh, I know one thing, minorly controversial statement that's tacking on to the end here, just because I wanted to talk about it and I didn't really have a better time to talk about it. I will say that there's an issue of, I feel, kind of leftists conflating things that are different as the same thing, even though they're different and not the same thing. For example, what's happening in the US right now is often referred to as a transgenocide, and even though my full support is with US trans people, like people who are trans in the US and the UK, in which situations is obviously terrible. for years in the past, it was illegal to be gay or to be trans. And it wasn't a trans genocide then because the camps weren't actually built. And now, and like in the past, there were people with no access to gender affirming care. And it wasn't the genocide then, like both because either the care didn't exist and trans people still did, or, you know, because simply the absence of access to medicine does not in itself a genocide make. I do feel there's value to understanding sometimes that words do have meaning and it's value to use them appropriately in order to be able to communicate our experiences. The fact that there's a massive regressive pushback on all kinds of laws about trans people does not in itself a genocide make. And I feel like it is in some ways a bit disrespectful to, you know, actual genocides that are going on to claim that simply removing access to medicine, which in itself has obviously not always existed, is in itself a genocide and not simply bad and wrong without being a genocide.
But okay, I will say that that's not the extent of what is happening, though. There's far more than just removal of healthcare. For instance, children are being actually taken from their families because they're trans, and or people have to like flee the states because of how they're being persecuted actively. So it's and I don't want to turn this into like a whole thing, but like I think that I'm not trans myself, neither is Mule. So I wish we had
far be it from us
right.
to say.
Right.
Yeah.
And you are trans. So like I don't want to.
Not American. I'm willing to accept that maybe I'm incorrect on things going on in America.
Right. Yeah. Like, and the thing is, like, whenever America is also kind of massively in flux at the moment because of how much transphobic legislation, like 500 bills or something, are being like it's constantly just they're trying to continually push this legislation to make it illegal to exist as a trans person or to be associated with people that are trans, things like that. To have I mean, people's kids have already been taken from their parents because those kids are trans, or the parents are allowing for trans children to exist in the family. So
what I wanted to say though is, again, to be completely clear, what is happening in the US is terrible and horrifying and should not happen. And honestly, maybe it is kind of like language policing of me to say, oh no, you shouldn't call it a genocide. Like, it really doesn't matter what it's called. What I wanted to say though was like, let's look at like the 1940s, right? The 1940s, being gay was illegal and being a cross-dresser was illegal, and there was no access to gender-affirming care. And yet I still argue it would be incorrect to claim that at the time there was a trans genocide, even though children were absolutely taken from their parents and institutionalized for being gay or trans, or like parents would put their kids in institutions, or, you know, being gay was literally illegal and there would constantly be raids on gay bars. And yet, despite this all, I haven't seen people talking about this period and claiming a literal actual genocide was being instated, because factually these people were not being killed by the state, even if the state was obviously doing lots of things that led to their deaths. I feel like currently we're at a period, you know, in which a lot of laws are passed to be very similar to, say, the US in the 1940s, in which obviously it's bad and bigoted, but not necessarily to call it a genocide. But maybe I'm just being weird and identity and like language policing. I'm fully willing to accept that.
I think I can understand where you're coming from, especially as a Jewish person, and there's definitely going to be people who disagree, and it's one of those things. We don't host a debate show here, so there's no real there's no real debate that I'm interested in having regarding this. But with regards to your, you know, your work that you're doing with Mesarvot and everything else that you've been doing, like standing up to Abigail Schrier, really, really massive kudos to you, and I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on and chatting to us.
No problem. My apologies for all the technical difficulties along the way. I promise I really did my best.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You did amazing.
Thank you. All right. Well, it was great. It's 1 a.m. So I will be leaving to go to sleep, hopefully. Good night.
Take care. Thanks so much for being here. Solidarity.
Bye.
Bye. Right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in for that show. I thought there was some really, really good stuff there. I think it's important for us to learn about what it's like to resist, the state of Israel from within it. And I think that Ayelet had like some really, really important, insights for us there. So please make sure you go and follow Mesarvot over on Twitter. Support the struggle. Support our comrades in Israel who are wanting to, escape forced conscription. And but in the meantime, chatters, we want you to do something extra based. We want you to do something extremely important and extremely based. And that is give us money. That's right. It's that time. And we're going to talk about it right now. It's the Red Planet Patreon. We literally have 98 patrons. You're all amazing. You're all wonderful. And we have a little goal that we want to hit, because we currently have, an amazing Conrad, an amazing producer who does so much awesome work for us.
We have a Conrad. You can have a Conrad too.
No, that's false advertising. He's only ours.
Oh, we have the only Conrad? That's amazing.
Just the one.
Just the one.
In the whole world. But yeah, we are currently trying to get enough money to hire an editor. An editor would be really, really good for us for a number of reasons. Not only would it improve the quality of the show, because we would be trying to do lots of little quips a lot more to actually segment off and put into like TikToks or whatever. I don't know. We'd be trying a lot harder basically. And I don't want to say that we're not trying hard right now, because we are. We definitely 100% are. I'm
trying hard.
I'm trying so hard. I'm trying so fucking hard right now. Yeah, but it also means that we could do some awesome in the field stuff, like me and Sophie have spoken about previously, potentially going to the ZAD, if you remember, us speaking to Issa and Jay for a mo, and also we could also go to stuff in the UK, like, go to some squats, etc., do some filming of some activists, etc., and we could, film that, make it into a little video, and then you've got more Red Planet content. Imagine that. How good would that be? If you want to see that happen, then you should become a Sprite. That's the first tier of our supporter stuff. It's the first tier of our Patreon. Get started with your support for Red Planet by becoming a Sprite for only £2 a month, aka $2 a month. Benefits include the sacred and forbidden knowledge that you are helping the Red Planet team, early access to VODs, and access to the Red Planet Discord. And that all sounds really, really good, doesn't it, Kira? But what's next? What's the next step up?
That's a great question. It's Goblin mode. It's $10 a month, American, and
£8.50 British.
£8.50 British. Everyone loves a goblin. You all get a little goblin mode from time to time. Complete your gobology by going goblin mode with everything from Sprite mode, and a pack of cool Red Planet stickers for you to stick in legal places and only in places like that, and access to the exclusive Red Planet Discord hangouts. Oh my God. That's exciting.
So exciting.
But what if I want to support even more? What if I want to give a little bit more? What if I want to be even more based?
That would be so beastly, Kira. And what that would mean is that you've gone beast mode. She's loving that one. For those of you that can't see us on the screen right now, she's loving that. Holy shit. Are you actually going to go beast mode with $20 a month or £17 a month? We can offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers and pin badges. Yeah, pin badges. Wear your excellent new Red Planet pin badge literally everywhere. It's completely cool and good to do so. But, Kira, listen, what if you're a sick fuck? What if you drink toilet water and
yeah, go on.
roll around in
Uh-huh.
shit and cum. Like,
Yeah.
what if you do that?
Well, luckily, Mule, it's a great question. Luckily, we have a tier just for those people. It's called Sicko Mode. For $100 a month or 85 British pounds,
That's right.
you can become a sicko. If you support us this much, we can only really reasonably offer you all the stuff in the lower tiers, plus a very, very special thank you message at the end of every stream. So we would like to thank our two sickos, JBP and Nerylon Starfire. Thank you for being disgusting.
Thank you so much for supporting us so much and being proud of your sicko nature, because
fucks.
I am too as sick as that. But yeah.
Mule, speaking of sick fucks, where can people find you?
You can find me in my sick fuckedness all over my YouTube channel, which is DJ Mule. It's spelled DJ Muel. I have got a recent video out. It's called Berserk is a Queer Polyamorous Love Story. It's really good. You should watch it. It's the best thing I've ever made. And I'm also on Twitch. I've not been streaming for a couple of weeks, but I will be back streaming tomorrow. I'm very excited to get back to streaming. And it's the first week of the month, which means that I'll be doing a special stream that we do on the first Wednesday of the month, which is Trash Bingus, where I play terrible games and chat plays bingo alongside that, and they can win good games by watching me play terrible games and desperately waiting to tick off a box. So that's that. But Kira, what about you? Where can we find you? What do you do? What's going on?
Well, thank you for asking, Mule. Didn't expect this. So yeah, you can find me everywhere as Kira Chats. It's twitch.tv/Kira Chats, twitter.com/Kira Chats, discord.gg/Kira Chats. Everyone's welcome, by the way. Subs gets a special channel access to a very special private sub only channel, but everyone's welcome to join discord.gg/Kira Chats. I'm a Discord goblin at this point. I'm always in Discord. I've kind of gone away from Twitter because of the whole, situation. And I've been just living like a gremlin in Discord. So if you ever want to hang out, that's where I'm at. Discord.gg/Kira Chats. My Twitch stream, like I said, twitch.tv/Kira Chats, but you can find all my links, including my not safe for work links. And I also have to mention, I am a sex worker. I don't know how that ties into all this, but I also have links in my link tree, linktr.ee/Kira Chats. Again, all of it's Kira Chats, and you can find my links there. But
that sounds incredible. And you should also go and check out our absent comrades. Poor Tim has been forced on a plane to go to somewhere in Aotearoa. He's gonna murder me for saying that wrong. And poor, sweet, beautiful Sophie, she's been forced to have a birthday because it's her birthday and she's amazing and we love her very much. Please check out Tim, twitter.com/dreadconquest, twitch.tv/conquest of dread, and also he's on Linktree, so linktree.ee/dreadconquest, and also Sophie is on linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars, all one word, and she's pretty much that on everything apart from Twitter and Twitch, where she's Sophie_FRM_Mars. So please go and show her some love because she is amazing.
I also think that we're all on Blue Sky except for you.
I'm not on Blue Sky. I don't know how you get it. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand it. Yeah, I'm getting a voice in my ear from Conrad. They won't let Conrad on. I guess we're just too sick. We're just too
You know why
much
they don't
off
like
sickos.
Conrad onto Blue Sky?
Why?
Because we don't have enough patrons.
That's what it is. I knew it. That's probably why they're not letting me on either, right? That we don't have enough patrons. Oh my god! If you want to see me on Blue Sky, you better give us money. That's how that's gonna work. Definitely not a guarantee. I can't confirm that. Anyway,
not a guarantee, but it can't hurt.
Can't hurt to try, can it? So yeah, incredible news. Thank you so much, everyone, for checking us out. Also, we should say as well, this is an important thing that we need to mention. The first bit of Red Planet merch. The Queer Existence is Resistance shirt is now available from mercenarycreative.com. It's right at the top of the page. It's got a cool like a lighter thing with like a hanky and some poppers coming out. The hankies come out, the poppers. It's like a Molotov. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. So yeah, go and get that and wear it everywhere because it's fun and good to do. But that's it from us. Thank you so much. We love you all. Please subscribe to us all over the place. YouTube, Twitch, TikTok. We should get on TikTok. We should start doing that again. Anyway, that's the end of the show.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. 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 It's fingies. It's fingies. Look at those fingies.